Warrior Lore. Chapter 2858. Even Du Xiaofu felt that the situation was very serious at this time. He'd come for Jiangchen, but Dongli Qihuang and Shan Yin hadn't given up on killing him. Even though he'd arrived at the final destination, he still had to fight one last time. Needless to say, the huge black hole in the void was definitely an extraordinary place. Jiangchen might be inside, but he was in a certain state and didn't know what was going on. Du Xiaofu, let's see how you'll survive today. Chun Yin snorted coldly. Then, he waved his hand. The 9 high-level Immortal Realm experts beside him immediately charged towards Du Xiaofu. Everyone, enter the ancient barren space. Leave this to me. Du Xiaofu didn't hesitate at all. He opened the ancient barren space and took in Suimo, Qi Yuanlin, Lin Kaiyun, Xiao Yun, and more than a dozen true severing experts. Their cultivation levels weren't high enough. They couldn't participate in the upcoming battle. You're far from enough to kill me. After doing all this, Du Xiaofu looked directly at the numerous experts who'd rushed toward him. These 9 were demons. Some had scales on their bodies, some had horns on their heads, and some had burly bodies. They all had different shapes and sizes. However, they were all very powerful. They were at least at the 7th sky of the immortal realm. Even though Du Xiaofu had broken through to the virtual path realm, he couldn't fight these 9 people head-on. If he fought them head-on, he'd die. Kill. The 9 immortal experts didn't waste time talking nonsense. Following Dongli Qihuang and Shen Yan's instructions, they all unleashed their full cultivation. Terrifying demonic qi surged through the void, shattering the void and shaking countless stars. Terrifying rumbles erupted, accompanied by a strong, murderous aura. They formed a series of attacks that shot toward Du Xiaofu. Get out of my way! Du Xiaofu roared. With a light wave of his arm, a large expanse of nomological light formed. The origin energy of these laws surged crazily, sweeping through the 9 heavens like a tide, shaking the 9 heavens. The 2 attacks quickly collided, erupting into a world-destroying storm that quickly spread out. In the distance, one star after another exploded under this storm and turned into powder before being swallowed by the black hole. If you want to kill me, then I'll take your lives first. Before the storm could recede, Du Xiaofu's voice rang out once more. He simply blocked the attacks of the 9 high-level immortal rank demon experts, and then he used the law of space to appear beside East Flame, Scarlet Phoenix, and Chen Yin. Way of the tyrannical fist. With a rumbling sound, a fist blasted out. It was as if it could suppress the heavens and kill the earth. It instantly smashed in front of Dongli Qihuang. This punch had condensed Du Xiaofu's powerful cultivation base. It directly sealed the space, immobilizing Dongli Qihuang. Under the restraint of the 4 primitive laws, Dongli Qihuang, one of the 2 great demon servants, could only stare at Du Xiaofu's attack. He couldn't do anything to counter it. The gap between the 2 of them was too big. If Du Xiaofu fought fiercely, he could definitely fight against an expert at 5th sky of Immortal Realm. However, Dongli Qihuang was only at 2nd sky of Immortal Realm. Even though he had 2 primitive laws, he couldn't close the gap between them. Kid, don't you dare. The 9 high-level Immortal Realm experts discolored in fright. They didn't expect that the purple-robed young man didn't care about them. He only aimed at Master Dongli. If they let him hit Master with one punch, the consequences would be unimaginable. The 9 of them didn't hesitate. They gathered their attacks and attacked Du Xiaofu one more time. Their reactions weren't slow, especially the 2 experts at 9th sky of Immortal Realm. They reacted almost as soon as Du Xiaofu moved. You dare to attack the 2 masters. Kid, you deserve to die 10,000 times. One of the experts at 9th sky of Immortal Realm of the Demon Clan said ferociously. He held a massive demon axe in his hand, which seemed to be able to split the sky and earth. In just a blink of an eye, the axe had reached Du Xiaofu's head. He believed that if that kid didn't stop in time and insisted on continuing to attack Lord Dongli, he would absolutely be able to slash that kid into 2 with this strike of his. Not only him, but the attacks of the other 8 powerhouses also arrived one after another, and like a storm, they attacked Du Xiaofu. Kill. However, It was out of everybody's expectation that the purple-robed young man didn't care about their attacks. He just stared at Dongli Chihuang and punched him in the chest. Almost at the same time, the massive demon axe slashed down and hit Du Xiaofu's body. At the same time, the other attacks also came. Some hit Du Xiaofu's body, but most of them blocked his fist. Boom! Du Xiaofu was blown away in just a blink of an eye. He rolled in the void and flew for a long distance before he could stop. His immortal Xin body was broken. His blood splashed, creating a series of purple and gold lines in the galaxy. On his back, there was an axe mark that was so deep that one could see his bones. It was as if it had split his spine apart. Damn that bastard! Many experts of the demon clan cursed, especially the two experts at Ninth Sky of Immortal Realm. They didn't expect Du Xiaofu to be so strong. He had taken so many attacks and was still alive. On the other hand, Master Dong Li's chest was caved in by that kid's punch. His internal organs were all smashed. He was severely injured. You want to kill me? Then you have to leave the two of you alive. As for the others, I'll play with them later. Du Xiaofu lifted his sleeve to wipe the blood at the corner of his mouth and said softly. His expression revealed a trace of ruthlessness. Since Dongli Chihuang and Qin Yin were bent on killing him and had already attacked repeatedly, it was impossible for him to continue tolerating it. Du Xiaofu wanted to meet General Qin, but he was stopped. The 9 high-level Immortal Realm demons were a great threat. Du Xiaofu knew he couldn't fight them head-on. Fortunately, it wouldn't be easy for them to kill him. Du Xiaofu could fight against experts at 5th Sky of Immortal Realm, but the experts at 7th, 8th, and 9th Sky of Immortal Realm didn't pose as great a threat to him as before. After all, it wasn't the difference between big realms. The gap between small realms wasn't like an insurmountable chasm. Thus, he decided to kill Dongli Chihuang and Shan Yin first. Then, he would find a way to get rid of the 9 high-level Immortal Realm experts. Then, he would enter the black hole and find Jiangchen. I'll leave this kid to you. You must kill him here. At this moment, Shan Yin ordered the 9 demon experts. Then, he took the wounded Dongli Chihuang and retreated to the black hole. The gap between them and Du Xiaofu was huge. At this moment, they weren't his match. If they continued to stay here, they would lose their lives. Want to leave? Did you ask for my permission? Seeing such a scene, Du Xiaofu raised his eyebrows slightly and said indifferently from afar. His figure vanished once more on the spot, and he charged directly towards Dongli Chihuang and Chen Yin. He had made up his mind. No matter what, he had to kill these two today to prevent future troubles. As he spoke, he unleashed the first style of Fuyao. However, his figure was only halfway out before he was forced to reveal himself. What an arrogant kid. How dare he ignore us? Under the attacks of the 9 high-level Immortal Realm experts, the void was sealed, and he couldn't pass through. The 9 of them were far stronger than Du Xiaofu. They had mastered profound laws of origin energy. When they interweaved, they formed a terrifying area and forced him out of the black hole. This wasn't the end of it. The experts joined forces and attacked Du Xiaofu fiercely. In an instant, the sky was filled with violent attacks. Like a raging sea, they roared and charged at Du Xiaofu. Origin Void Slaying Sword. Open. As soon as Du Xiaofu appeared, he let out a deep roar. It was like a thunderclap, and his roar broke the void. In the distance, stars exploded one after another, turning into dust under this shout. Along with this, circles of law light flashed on the purple-robed young man's body. The 4 primordial laws split apart and transformed into an 8 trigrams diagram. Then, the 8 trigrams diagram transformed crazily and formed a circle of light that surrounded Du Xiaofu's body in the center. There were thousands of scenes in the circle of light. Everything began to transform. Heaven and earth appeared. The great Tao rotated. Order took shape, and monstrous power surged like a tide. Under the combination of Du Xiaofu's power, all kinds of power gathered quickly and transformed into a light sword that could pierce through the heavens. It was like the most terrifying attack of the heavens, and it suddenly slashed down. Slash! The void was split open, and the entire star field was about to be divided into 2. The terrifying light sword attack instantly pierced through the attacks of the 9 undying demons, causing a crack to appear. The surrounding space shackles were also destroyed. This was Du Xiaofu's strongest move. Slashing out with his sword, it nearly consumed 30% of his strength. Seizing the chance when the space confinement was broken, he used the first style of Fu Yao and appeared behind Dongli Qihuang and Shen Yin in just a blink of an eye. That bastard! Damn it! The 9 immortal demons shouted angrily. They were extremely indignant. That kid was too evil. His attack was so powerful that it carried the Dao aura. Otherwise, even though he was at 5th sky of a mortal realm, he couldn't have broken their confinement that easily. Leave your life here. As these words came out of Du Xiaofu's mouth, he once again smashed his fist down. This time, his target wasn't the Eastern Flame Crimson Phoenix any longer, and he was charging straight at Chen Yin instead. When he used his full power of the virtual path realm, it was really intimidating. With one punch, the world lost its color, and the sun and moon dimmed. The galaxy in the sky was stirred up. Countless stars left their original orbits and fell into the black hole. Puff! This punch blasted onto Chen Yan's back as expected, causing him to be directly blasted flying. Chen Yin collided with a star that was extremely far away, and it shook the star into powder. Puff! At the instant that Du Xiaofu smashed onto Chen Yin, he suffered another heavy blow. The reaction of the 9 high immortal level demons was too fast. Their attacks were swift and fierce. He couldn't compete with them at all. He was blown away again. Blood gushed out of his mouth, and his face turned gloomy. Masters, run! We must kill this kid. The group of immortal demons shouted and attacked Du Xiaofu one more time. At the same time, an expert at 9th sky of a mortal realm took East Mythical Red Phoenix and Shen Yin to escort them to the black hole. Today, I'm going to waste my time with you too. Du Xiaofu squinted, emitting a ruthless light. He wasn't in a hurry to attack. Instead, he looked around. He took out the precious herbs from his Qinkuan bag and swallowed them. The efficacy of the herbs was quickly refined to restore his strength. Kid, let's see how many more attacks you can resist. The 9th sky of a mortal realm expert who stayed behind shouted coldly. He took the other 7 immortal demons and pressed forward. They weren't in a hurry to attack. They just wanted to trap the kid and give the 2 masters time to escape. As long as the 2 masters left, they wouldn't have to worry about fighting anymore. In front of the 8 high-level immortal realm experts, no matter how fierce the purple-robed young man was, he couldn't do anything. When the opponent was exhausted to a certain extent, he wouldn't have a chance to escape even if he wanted to. I'm determined to kill them. Even you can't stop me. Du Xiaofu snorted coldly. Suddenly, an earth-shaking dragon roar came from his throat. Rings of sound waves spread out and turned into ripples that hit the galaxy. The second transformation of the green spirit armor was activated. A 10,000 zhonglong green dragon coiled up like a mountain ridge, crushing the void. Attack together. Kill this kid. The 8 immortal demons shouted and swarmed forward. Du Xiaofu's attack had frightened them. They didn't know how strong he was, so they didn't dare to delay any longer. They were afraid that he would find a chance to kill his way out of the encirclement. Origin Sky-Killing Sword. Kill. Facing another encirclement, Du Xiaofu unleashed the quintessence sky-slaying sword again. However, this time, he didn't use his full strength. He only used 10% of his strength to cut a small gap in the encirclement. However, this small gap was enough for him to use his Space Upanishad to chase after Dongli Qihuang and Shen Yin. However, a sword of light descended from the sky above the azure dragon, and it obliterated space. After it tore through the terrifying obstruction, it vanished once more and appeared where Chen Yin and Eastern Flame Crimson Phoenix were at the same time. Kid, go die. The demon expert at 9th sky of a mortal realm, who was protecting Eastly Red Phoenix and Shen Yin, grinned fiendishly. He was well prepared. He directly released his demon chi, creating a massive demon saber that hovered in the air. When Du Xiaofu appeared, the demon saber slashed at his chest. Do you really think you can stop me? Du Xiaofu sneered. Unexpectedly, he used the law of space twice in a row and cleverly avoided such a blow. His figure flickered twice, and he appeared behind the two demon attendants again. Damn it! The ninth sky of Immortal Realm expert cursed and changed the direction of his attack. However, it was too late. Du Xiaofu's fists punched Dongli Qihuang and Shen Yan at the same time. They were blown away, vomiting blood. Luckily, the other experts had come back in time. Otherwise, if they hadn't stopped Du Xiaofu's attack, they would have been killed. Kid, I will kill you. The group of high-level Immortal Realm experts roared continuously, their roars shaking the sky. Du Xiaofu had enraged them. Even under the siege of 9 experts, this kid could still break through their defense and attack the two masters. This result had enraged them. They almost went crazy. If they didn't kill this purple-robed young man, it would be their biggest humiliation. Go! Blood sprayed from the bodies of Eastern Flame, Crimson Phoenix, and Chan Yen, and their expressions were heavy to the extreme. They didn't dare to stay any longer. Du Xiaofu was too ferocious. Even 9 experts couldn't stop him. They didn't want to think too much. They just wanted to get into the black hole as soon as possible. Under the lead of the 9th sky of Immortal Realm expert, the 3 of them flew away quickly. Do you think you can escape? In the distance, Du Xiaofu's azure dragon body had been badly damaged. His scales were flying, his flesh was exploding, and his bones were covered in stubble. He didn't have an immortal body. Even though he had the double protection of the indestructible Xian body and the azure spirit armor, he couldn't avoid being killed by the 9 Immortal Realm experts. However, Du Xiaofu had the intention to kill Dongli Qihuang and Shan Yan. He didn't want them to live anymore. Therefore, the previous scene continued to play out in this star field. Du Xiaofu broke through the encirclement of numerous Immortal Realm experts time and time again. He arrived near Dongli Qihuang and Shen Yin time and time again, and he launched unimaginable attacks on them. He was attacked many times, and his azure dragon body was almost broken in half. However, Du Xiaofu persisted. His strength was almost exhausted. Every time he used the quintessence Sky Slayer sword, a large portion of his strength would be extracted. This was a desperate battle. He disregarded the 9 high-level Immortal Realm experts and killed the target they were protecting. This process was very difficult, and it caused Du Xiaofu to suffer heavy injuries. Fortunately, Dongli Qihuang and Shen Yan were on the verge of death and couldn't hold on any longer. Under Du Xiaofu's desperate attacks, they were heavily injured and their lives were hanging by a thread before they could even make a move. We've arrived at the black hole. Go in quickly. Dongli Qihuang's voice was already extremely weak. He gazed at the black hole before him and instructed the Immortal Realm experts by his side. So long as they entered the black hole, Du Xiaofu wouldn't be able to continue acting rashly. The experts from the Devil Clan who carried them nodded, and then they sped up and plunged into the black hole. Could it be that you'll be able to avoid death if you hide in there? Du Xiaofu muttered as he gazed at the extraordinarily large black hole. It was like the enormous mouth of a terrifying devil, and it was even vaster than the sky and possessed a terrifying devouring force. Even if he was just standing in the nearby void, Du Xiaofu could feel a shapeless, tearing force on him, and it wanted to devour him. He stood on the spot for a moment before he noticed that the 8 Immortal Realm experts behind him had caught up to him once more. Du Xiaofu didn't even think about it before he plunged into the black hole. Chapter 2859. In the fierce battle, Du Xiaofu suffered unimaginable injuries, while Dongli Qihuang and Shen Yan were on the verge of death. If it weren't for the protection of the high-level immortal experts, the 2 of them would have died in Du Xiaofu's hands. Even so, even though Du Xiaofu was severely exhausted, he still managed to break out of the encirclement of the powerhouses again and again, trying to kill the 2 of them. When Du Xiaofu followed Dongli Qihuang, Shan Yan, and the 9th sky of Immortal Realm expert into the black hole, he saw a different scene that shocked him. What is this place? Du Xiaofu was a little stunned. He stood in the void, unable to calm down. Everywhere he looked was a scene of devastation. Waves of fishy smell assaulted his face, making him want to vomit. The entire space was filled with waves of thick devil qi. It was extremely terrifying. The ground was covered with eerie broken bones. Not a single one of them was in a complete state. In the distant river, scarlet blood flowed. A large amount of mist shrouded the sky, causing the sky to be dark and blood-red. This kind of space made Du Xiaofu feel very shocked. He had never seen anything like this before. Even though the fiend god battlefield had been soaked in blood for countless years, it still couldn't compare to the terrifying aura here. This place could definitely be called a devil's domain. The aura here is similar to the fiend god battlefield, but it's much more terrifying. Du Xiaofu came to this conclusion after observing for a while. In his perception, this space was filled with endless bloodthirsty and murderous aura. It was pervasive and constantly attacked his body and primordial spirit. This space was too terrifying. He could vaguely hear the terrifying sounds of fighting and the sound of flowing blood. In addition, he could vaguely hear the sound of bones being gnawed. It was constantly attacking his perception. If it wasn't for the fact that his cultivation was deep, he would have lost control of his mind if he came here before he broke through to the Void Dao stage. There are other creatures here. After some observation, Du Xiaofu discovered that there were many creatures everywhere, but these creatures all had the appearance of the demon clan. Although these demons were not particularly powerful, and almost none of them were at the immortal realm, their numbers were huge. With a simple scan, Du Xiaofu could sense at least billions of creatures. This caused Du Xiaofu to be deeply shocked. Could this really be a demonic domain? Didn't that mean that this place could be considered the nest of the demon race? Such a conjecture made him even more unable to calm down. If this was really the case, then the situation would be extremely bad. Du Xiaofu, since you've come in, just wait here for the Lord to come and see you. In the distance, Dongli Qihuang and Shen Yin were supported by the demon expert at Ninth Sky of Immortal Realm. They talked to Du Xiaofu. The two of them had suffered such deep injuries that they couldn't even stand properly. Their faces were filled with unwillingness. They'd originally wanted to kill Du Xiaofu outside, even if it meant being punished by the Lord. But this brat wasn't just strong. He was also treacherous and cunning. He'd pursued them relentlessly, risking serious injuries and putting himself in danger to kill them. At this moment, he had already entered this space. If he continued to attack, he was afraid that His Excellency would really be angered. Where's Jiangchen? When he heard Dongli Qihuang's voice, Du Xiaofu snapped out of his daze. He stopped observing his surroundings and asked in return, do you think the Lord is someone you can meet just because you want to? Just wait here. Once the Lord comes out of seclusion, he'll naturally come find you. Shen Yin snorted coldly. Is that so? Du Xiaofu arched his brows and continued, it's boring to just wait here. Since Jiangchen won't show up, I'll kill the two of you first. Before he could finish, he wielded the origin, void-slaying sword, and slashed at Dongli Qihuang and Shen Yin. This attack was so sudden that no one had time to react. The demon expert at Ninth Sky of Immortal Realm, standing next to the two demon attendants, was stunned for a moment. Du Xiaofu attacked as soon as he said he would. He'd really caught the enemy off guard. As the sword light slashed down, it caused the heavens and the earth to be split in half from top to bottom. But in the void, there were laws circulating, quintessence deriving, and Taoist rhymes transforming. The vast sword light slashed the sky above and broke the 9 underworlds below. The peerless mighty force instantly bound the eastern flame Scarlet Phoenix and Chen Yin, causing them to be unable to move at all. Kid, you've got guts. The Ninth Sky of Immortal Realm expert was enraged. He hastily defended himself. A huge screen formed in his hand. Demon Chi filled the sky and turned into a shield-like object, blocking the three of them. Swish! The sword slashed down, and the three figures were pushed back at the same time. The pitch-black light shield made of Demon Chi was broken instantly. The sword power was also shattered. However, the aftermath of the attack still spread out, shaking the sky. The destructive power of the origin was boundless, shaking the sky and the earth, destroying everything. The Ninth Sky of Immortal Realm expert was too hasty to defend himself. He didn't have time to gather more energy before Du Xiaofu's attack arrived. He was still fine. Relying on his tyrannical cultivation, he was able to easily withstand the shockwaves from the sword strike. However, The Eastern Flame Qi Huang and Chen Yin weren't so lucky. They were already seriously injured, and they suffered a terrifying shock amidst the terrifying commotion. Their vital energy and blood roiled, and they spat out large mouthfuls of blood in succession. "Kid, you're courting death." The 8 experts who had followed behind Du Xiaofu shouted angrily. They quickly besieged Du Xiaofu, trying to trap him. On the other hand, the Eastern Flame Crimson Phoenix and Chen Yin fled towards the depths of this expanse of space. "Let's see how long you can run." Du Xiaofu didn't mind the people behind him. He continued to use his space principle to catch up with Dongli Qihuang and Shan Yin, attacking them one more time. Shortly after, the scene outside the black hole reappeared. The ninth sky of a mortal realm expert was protecting Dongli Qihuang and Shan Yin as they were running away. Behind them, the 8 high-level immortal realm experts attacked continuously, trying to stop Du Xiaofu and subdue him. In the middle, Du Xiaofu withstood the terrifying attacks one after another, but he still hit the 2 demon attendants time and time again. In the blink of an eye, it hadn't been long before Chen Yin and the Eastern Flame Crimson Phoenix were successively attacked to the point of being on the verge of death. "Kid, I'm going to tear you into pieces." Many high-level immortal realm experts roared angrily, but they couldn't do anything other than stop Du Xiaofu. The space principle was too strange, appearing and disappearing unpredictably. They had used all kinds of methods to seal him, but that kid had used the Origin Void Slaying Sword to break them. They couldn't stop him completely. If it weren't for them standing in front and causing a strong disturbance to Du Xiaofu, even if the 2 demon attendants had 10 lives, they would have died long ago. "I said I'll kill you first, so I won't let you go," Du Xiaofu said through gritted teeth. He was severely wounded, and he had consumed more than 90% of his energy. However, he wasn't afraid at all. He was determined to kill Dongli Qihuang and Shan Yin. In the worst case, he would hide in the desolate ancient space to recover after killing them. Then, he would come out to deal with the other 9 high-level immortal realm experts. While they were talking, Du Xiaofu broke through the 8 experts' blockade one more time. Then, he wielded his powerful sword and attacked. The 9th sky of a mortal realm expert by Dongli Qihuang and Shan Yan's side attacked fiercely. However, Du Xiaofu's space principle was constantly activated, dodging his attacks. His silhouette looked like a twinkling star in the night sky, suddenly in front and suddenly behind, making it hard for others to grasp his movements. After a series of leaps and bounds, Du Xiaofu finally found a chance to approach Dongli Qihuang and Shan Yin. The terrifying sword light was flashing. The cold light was so dense that it seemed to be real. Everyone present was an expert, so they could feel the endless power carried by this sword light. Under it, the void was being destroyed, the heaven and earth were rotating, the time and space were collapsing, and the great Tao was evolving. Lines of principle were mixed with terrifying Tao aura, crushing the world and destroying everything that stood in their way. At this moment, both Dongli Qihuang and Chen Yin were stunned. They seemed as if they'd been dumbstruck, and they stood there motionlessly as they watched the terrifying sword light descend. They seemed to see death beckoning them. The Origin Sky Slaying Sword was like an object from the netherworld that wanted to swallow them and bring them back to the Yellow Spring. "Die!" Du Xiaofu also shouted fiercely. He moved with the momentum, and the space around him was disturbed by his sword light. He believed that so long as this strike descended, then the Eastern Flame Crimson Phoenix and Chen Yin would definitely die a graveless death. However, right at this moment, a feeling of extreme danger suddenly arose in Du Xiaofu's heart. In the next instant, a palm that was pure white like jade suddenly appeared out of thin air, and it didn't fluctuate at all as it directly appeared where Du Xiaofu's sword light was. This palm was bent and knocked lightly like an ordinary person flicking their finger, and it was simple to the extreme. However, such a simple action had directly struck Du Xiaofu's strongest attack that he'd condensed all his strength into. Clang! A clear and resounding sound suddenly resounded. Swish! Du Xiaofu's sword light instantly collapsed and dispersed, and it transformed into energy fragments and lines of the obliteration laws that covered the sky. The energy of the laws was crushed, the quintessence was dispersed, and the aura of the Tao was suppressed. Du Xiaofu was affected by it, and his entire body was instantly blasted flying. He drew out a perfectly straight line as he smashed through the continuous expanse of space, and in the end, he collided with a majestic mountain 5,000 kilometers away and flattened it. At the same place, a terrifying energy storm was swirling and had the power to destroy everything. However, this scene vanished like smoke and clouds under the gentle touch of the palm. Everything was annihilated, and the void regained its tranquility. This palm was so terrifying that it could easily break Du Xiaofu's strongest attack. Others didn't know how strong the Origin Void Slaying Sword was, but Dongli Qihuang, Shan Yan, and the 9 Immortal Realm experts of the Demon Clan knew it clearly. Not to mention ordinary people. Even the 2 of them at the 9th sky of the Immortal Realm couldn't break that attack so easily. The identity of the intruder was about to be revealed. My lord. The 9 Immortal Realm experts all knelt down at the same time and saluted to the void with a sense of fear and trepidation. Dongli Qihuang and Chan Yin forcefully supported their bodies that were on the verge of collapse as they bowed and were extremely respectful. While they were saluting, a young man around 30 years old stepped out of the space and appeared in front of them. His face was cold and handsome, and he had a pair of deep, dark eyes. His thick eyebrows were slightly raised in a rebellious manner. He wore a long, light purple robe, which wasn't different from the purple robe Du Xiaofu was used to wearing. However, the long, light purple robe on the man's body made him look elegant and graceful. The man's hair was tied high on his head, and his long hair flowed down his back like flowing water. His head was slightly tilted up, and his handsome side profile was impeccable. Yeah. Facing the respect of Dongli Qihuang, Shan Yan, and more than 10 experts of the Demon Clan, the man just grunted and ignored them. He just looked at Du Xiaofu's location. He took a step forward and disappeared in a blink of an eye. The distance of millions of miles was crossed by him easily. In the next instant, the man arrived at the collapsed mountain peak. Jiangchen. Du Xiaofu crawled up from the wreckage on the ground and coughed violently a few times. Then, he raised his eyes and looked at the man in front of him. Du Xiaofu was incomparably familiar with this man's appearance. If it wasn't Jiangchen, whom he hadn't seen for many years, who else could it be? Du Xiaofu's heart was conflicted and indescribable. At this moment, it was becoming increasingly difficult for him to calm down. He stared at Jiangchen. The light in Jiangchen's eyes was far too different from before. His pitch-black eyes glowed with a faint, blood-red light. The 2 old friends stood facing each other. Du Xiaofu didn't feel the same as before. It was as if he was facing a stranger, except this stranger looked like Jiangchen. You can call me Jiangchen, or you can call me by another name. Jiangchen looked indifferently at Du Xiaofu, then spoke softly. His expression was calm and unruffled. There was no joy or excitement at meeting an old friend, nor was there any murderous intent like when facing an enemy. He looked at Du Xiaofu with eyes as calm as an ancient well, as if he were talking to someone completely unrelated to him. Perhaps it would be more appropriate for me to call you the demon ancestor. Du Xiaofu was silent for a long time, then finally said these words. He couldn't help but inwardly sigh. His intuition couldn't be wrong. Jiangchen really was no longer the Jiangchen he knew. Based on his previous attack, it was clear that he hadn't held back in the slightest. He'd sent him flying. Du Xiaofu felt his condition was indescribably terrible. In fact, it was even worse than when he'd resisted the Great Tao's heavenly punishment. His strength had already been exhausted to the extreme. He couldn't fight anymore. It doesn't matter if I'm called Jiangchen or the Demon Ancestor. I'm Jiangchen, and I'm the Demon Ancestor. But that's not important. Finally, Jiangchen focused his gaze and looked seriously at Du Xiaofu. What's important is that you're here. His eyes seemed to contain a strange, magical power that caused Du Xiaofu's soul to tighten. It was as if he couldn't move. This feeling was too terrifying. He couldn't control himself at all. It was as if he'd fallen under someone else's control. You wanted to see me. Is there anything you want to say? After a long while, Du Xiaofu finally managed to regain his composure. He wanted to test Jiangchen and see what kind of state he was in. In reality, Du Xiaofu still held on to some hope. He hoped that Jiangxin's consciousness had simply been suppressed by the demon ancestor and hadn't fused with him. If that was the case, it didn't mean he had no chance of rescuing Jiangxin. Naturally, I have something to say to you. Jiangxin gently turned around and said calmly, "Back in the divine battle world, the demon god died by my hands. So I've repaid the favor I owed you. Since then, we don't owe each other anything." Du Xiaofu remained silent. He knew what the favor Jiangxin was talking about. Many years ago, on his way back from the ancient wastelands to the desolate country, Du Xiaofu had encountered Dongli Qihuang and Chen Yan. Just as he was about to kill them, Jiangxin suddenly appeared and took them from him, promising him a favor. However, Du Xiaofu had never taken this seriously. After all, he and Jiangxin were on good terms. He didn't take this matter to heart. It could be said that back then, Jiangxin was still in a muddle-headed state. He didn't even know his true identity. He'd only relied on his intuition to believe that Dongli Qihuang and Chen Yan were related to him. However, Du Xiaofu also knew that when Jiangxin killed the demon god, he must have awakened some of his memories. "I am Jiangxin, and also the demon ancestor." At that moment, Jiangxin spoke again. "Therefore, I will inevitably become enemies with the entire 33 heavens. No one will be able to stop me." As he spoke, he turned to look at Du Xiaofu. "As Jiangxin, and for the sake of our friendship, I advise you to return to Shenwu world. Don't get involved in these muddy waters. If you can do that, we can't say we're friends, but we definitely won't be enemies. I can also promise you one thing. Shenwu world will be the only pure land the demon race can conquer." As Jiangxin spoke, his gaze was incomparably calm, without the slightest ripple of emotion. It was terrifyingly calm. Du Xiaofu could feel that the other party was only saying this because of their friendship in the past. Perhaps there were other reasons, but this sentence was sincere enough. However, he could also sense something else. Jiangxin could no longer return. If Jiangxin was under the control of the demon ancestor's primordial spirit, his own intelligence would have been suppressed. He definitely wouldn't have felt this way. He wouldn't have allowed himself to return to Shenwu world and even promised that it would become the only pure land. This could only mean one thing. Jiangxin had changed. There was nothing he could do to reverse the situation. "Are you pitying me? Or are you afraid of me?" Since he was certain of this, Du Xiaofu didn't think too much about it. Instead, a strange smile tugged at the corners of his lips as he asked Jiangxin. From the standpoint of an old friend, Jiangxin was pitying him. He didn't want him and the people of Shenwu world to be implicated in the war. Chapter 2860. However, ever since the Qinshu realm's Jinghua heaven, Dongli Qihuang and Chen Yin had been plotting to kill him. They'd made it clear that he would become the greatest obstacle to the demon race's rise to prominence. Judging from this, perhaps Jiangxin was afraid of him. Afraid? When he heard Du Xiaofu's words, Jiangxin's incomparably calm face broke into a faint smile. He seemed extremely disdainful. "Given your current strength, what qualifications do you think you have to make me fear you?" As he spoke, he cast a sidelong glance at Du Xiaofu, his gaze filled with ridicule. In the face of Jiangxin's words, Du Xiaofu didn't respond. Instead, he remained silent and didn't refute him. Jiangxin's words made sense. Judging from the power he displayed when he attacked, he'd at least reached the meditative realm. This kind of strength was terrifying enough. Even in the 33 heavens, he was a peerless existence. Even though Du Xiaofu had reached the legendary realm of the virtual Tao, he'd only just begun on this path. Compared to Jiangxin, he was still far, far away. Therefore, if Jiangxin really wanted to kill him, it would be as easy as flipping over his hand. "Listen to my advice. Return to Shenwu world and we'll mind our own business." When Jiangxin saw that Du Xiaofu wasn't saying anything, he spoke again. "Why am I the one returning to Shenwu world? Why aren't you the one giving up on the demon race's so-called grand plan and coexisting peacefully with the 33 heavens?" Du Xiaofu frowned slightly and asked in return. He didn't dodge. Instead, he stared straight into Jiangxin's eyes, taking in every bit of his expression. Du Xiaofu's intuition told him that Jiangxin truly did fear him. Although he didn't know where this fear came from, there had to be a fundamental reason. "I am the demon ancestor. It is fated that I cannot coexist with the 33 heavens. Jiangchen's expression didn't change in the slightest. After he finished speaking, he looked at Du Xiaofu again and said, "There's no point in talking too much nonsense. The opportunity has been given to you. Whether or not you seize it depends on your choice. The reason why I'm saying this is because of our past friendship. If you don't know what's good for you and insist on obstructing the rise of my demon race, then don't blame me for being ruthless." At the end of his speech, Jiangchen's voice sank slightly, as if he was angry. However, his expression didn't change much, and it was as calm and indifferent as before. "It's impossible for me to return to Shenwu world. If you want to do it now." Du Xiaofu stared intently at Jiangchen, getting straight to the point. He couldn't accept such a proposal, even though he didn't have many attachments in the 33 heavens. There were only old friends like Fui Bai and the old ancestor of the Heavenly Wood Divine Tree, as well as the Yuqing Divine Nation. However, once the demon race truly rose to prominence, would they really let Shenwu world go? On the other hand, if the demon race were to start another bloody war, the Yuqing Divine Kingdom would definitely not stay out of it. The other experts like Yu Taiyan, Chu Daoju, Ling Feng, Long San, and the others would definitely not turn a blind eye to it. If these people were to participate in the battle, Du Xiaofu would also feel uneasy hiding in a corner. That was why he couldn't agree to Jiangchen's proposal. Even if he really did want to become enemies, he'd do it for good. By now, Du Xiaofu was certain that the young man in front of him was exactly as he'd said. He was the demon ancestor, but he was also Jiangchen. Jiangchen's memories were still there. Nothing had changed, but at the same time, his identity as the demon ancestor had become one. In that case, there was no way to make him realize his mistake and give up on the bloody war. "Du Xiaofu, do you really think I won't kill you?" As if someone had touched a nerve, Jiangchen was suddenly enraged. Layers of murderous intent radiated from his chiseled face. His clothes fluttered without the wind, and it suddenly fluttered while a terrifying force coiled around him. It was the quintessence energy of the Grand Tao, and it formed the most perfect laws in the world, causing Du Xiaofu's figure to be confined on the spot and unable to move. "I told you, if you want to kill me, you can do it now," Du Xiaofu said calmly. He looked at Jiangchen and said, "In reality, you've been wanting to kill me for a long time. Why put on such an act now? Otherwise, given your status, Dongli Qihuang and Shan Yan wouldn't have tried to kill me over and over again. The two of them have some misgivings about our relationship, but the truth is that you've always tacitly approved of their actions. Isn't that right?" He'd seen through these problems long ago, but now that he'd pointed them out, he felt a strange sensation in his heart. He'd completely torn away all pretenses of cordiality with Jiangchen and stood on opposite sides. Du Xiaofu sighed inwardly. All of this was within his expectations, but now that he was faced with it, he found it difficult to accept. After all, Jiangchen had helped him a great deal in divine martial world. He really did view him as a friend. In the face of Du Xiaofu's rhetorical question, Jiangchen fell silent for a long time. He didn't say anything. Du Xiaofu didn't say anything either. The two of them stood facing each other, as if neither wanted to be the first to break the silence. The atmosphere was somewhat strange. In the distance, Dongli Qihuang, Shan Yan, and the 9 high-level immortal experts all watched the situation nervously, their hearts in their throats. "Your Excellency, you must take action to suppress this brat. You absolutely can't let him live. If Du Xiaofu doesn't die, he'll be a huge threat to our demon race. He must be killed. This brat has only cultivated for a few years, yet he's already reached the ancient era's Void Dao realm. If he's given more time to grow, the demon race will have another great enemy in the future. Your Excellency, you must take action." Many experts cried silently in their hearts, hoping that Jiangchen could use his absolute strength to kill Du Xiaofu and eliminate the demon race's greatest threat. This was especially true for Dongli Qihuang and Shan Yan. Since their early years in divine martial world, they'd had many dealings with Du Xiaofu. After arriving in the 33 heavens, they'd attacked him many times, but they still hadn't been able to kill him. An enemy like this made the two of them feel uneasy. As time passed, they grew more and more fearful of Du Xiaofu. They didn't dare underestimate him in the slightest. Earlier, if their excellency hadn't appeared in time to save them, they probably would have died under Du Xiaofu's sword. Your excellency will definitely kill him. Definitely. Dongli Qihuang's aura was very unstable. He'd been deeply injured by Du Xiaofu, but he still clenched his fists tightly and gritted his teeth. Your excellency's physical body was suppressed in divine martial world for many years. His new consciousness has also affected him. I hope that these things won't really cause him to change too much. Xin Yin was still somewhat worried. Jiangchen's identity was a completely new consciousness and had nothing to do with the demon ancestor. Even if His Excellency had awakened many of his ancient memories, he'd still be somewhat affected. Then, no one said anything. They all stared intently at Du Xiaofu and their Excellency, their eyes filled with hope. They hoped to see their Excellency take action. It seems you're stubborn. Since that's the case, I'll kill you right here, right now. He looked at Du Xiaofu and said, "Don't worry, Du Xiaofu." As soon as he finished speaking, he lightly thrust his palm towards Du Xiaofu. This palm seemed calm, without any fluctuations emitting from it. But Du Xiaofu could feel layers upon layers of the great Tao circulating between the palm and fingers. A terrifying strength of laws was woven together, forming a cage that bound him up. Is this the power of the meditative realm? As he watched the palm descend, Du Xiaofu's eyes narrowed. He found it difficult to calm the shock in his heart. Up until now, aside from Jiangchen, he'd only encountered one other meditative realm expert. That was the primordial demon dragon clan's patriarch Draconic. This was the first time he'd faced one head-on. Around Jiangchen's palm, runes invisible to the naked eye took shape. Within the void, it was as if heaven and earth were rotating. Mountains were collapsing, giant waves were roaring, the sky was trembling, and the earth was overturned. The terrifying power of the world pressed down on him. The terrifying power was like the collapse of the world, the collapse of the heavenly Tao, and all living things crumbled. Rumble. An invisible force came crashing down. Even though Du Xiaofu was far away, he could smell the scent of death. He was completely unable to struggle. In reality, he didn't struggle in the slightest. Disregarding whether or not he could do anything in front of the meditative realm, he was already heavily injured. He'd long since reached the end of his tether. There was no way he could put up any effective resistance. He could only watch helplessly as the pressure bore down on him. It was like an incomparably majestic mountain was about to crush him into powder. Rumble. Du Xiaofu seemed to hear a terrifying rumble. It was like a series of muffled thunders rolling towards him. Their brazen aura suppressed the world and devoured everything in its path. Kikik, His Excellency has finally made his move. Du Xiaofu's time of death has come. No one can save him. In the distance, Dongli Qihuang couldn't help but laugh sinisterly. His laughter carried an incomparably carefree feeling. With His Excellency's move, Du Xiaofu will undoubtedly die. So long as he dies, we'll be rid of a calamity for our demon race. Chun Yan's brows eased up as well, and he felt much more relaxed. They were well aware of Du Xiaofu's threat. Just as His Excellency and His Excellency had said, the demon race was indeed afraid of him. Otherwise, the two of them wouldn't have repeatedly attacked and tried to kill him as soon as possible. If His Excellency and His Excellency had both awakened back in the divine martial world, they absolutely wouldn't have let him live until now. But that didn't matter. Today, His Excellency would personally kill him. He absolutely wouldn't give Du Xiaofu a chance to live. Dongli Qihuang and Chen Yan's lips curled into sinister smiles. It was as if they could already see Du Xiaofu's body exploding and his primordial spirit dying. I've already given you a chance. You're the one who didn't know how to cherish it. These words came out of Jiangchen's mouth. His palm descended gently, but it seemed to carry the power of 1,000 caddies. It suppressed everything and crushed everything in its path. Du Xiaofu stood there unmoving, as if he'd lost his mind. He didn't close his eyes and wait for death. Instead, he calmly felt the vast, formless power crushing down on him. There were some things he couldn't change. He could only face them head-on. Since Jiangchen wanted to kill him and had the absolute power to crush him, there was nothing more to think about. He could only wait calmly. "I never thought I'd die at your hands," Du Xiaofu said softly. His heart was filled with boundless emotion, and he couldn't help but lament endlessly. However, just as Du Xiaofu was sighing with emotion, a sharp beam of light suddenly burst forth from the void in front of him. The light was like a peerless blade, tearing through heaven and earth as it appeared before him. Terrifying light exploded forth, and a murderous aura shook the heavens and earth. It formed the shape of a domineering blade and slashed downwards. Crackle! Jiangxin's palm was surrounded by scenes of destruction and the collapse of the great Tao. Instantly, everything was split apart by the light. Terrifying and vast, the origin power of the great Tao exploded, transforming into a raging tide that filled the sky, destroying everything in its path. Enormous black holes appeared in the surrounding area. It was incomparably terrifying. As for Jiangxin, he was sent flying by this sudden turn of events. He was sent flying into the distance. Du Xiaofu's gaze trembled. He couldn't hide his pounding heart. The aura of that light was very familiar. He'd encountered it before, so he recognized it immediately. It's that blade again. It's that bloodbath. Du Xiaofu's eyes widened. When he saw a blood-gold longsword appear in the void before him, a terrifying murderous aura swirled around it. It was intimidating. How could Du Xiaofu not recognize such a longsword? Back in the Qiansu Jinghua heaven, they'd been hunted down by numerous beast experts. Then, they'd been attacked by a meditative forgetfulness expert. When they'd been forced out of the ancient desolate dimension and faced death, it was his master, Yu Yuqian, Yu Taiyan, and the others who'd arrived with this blade and saved them. Du Xiaofu's memories of the bloodbath were still fresh in his mind. It was the most terrifying weapon he'd ever seen. Back in the day, thousands of Yuqing divine kingdoms, never-dying realm cultivators had been surrounded by hundreds of thousands of beast experts. They'd relied on the bloodbath to intimidate everyone present. Even the meditative forgetfulness expert didn't dare act rashly. In the end, they'd relied on the longsword to tear open the void and enter the supreme Changrong heaven, allowing them to escape unscathed. Du Xiaofu feared he'd never be able to remember such a scene in his life. It was too deeply engraved in his mind, too shocking. And now, just as Jiangxin was about to attack him, the bloodbath reappeared. "Is Master here?" muttered Du Xiaofu. He glanced around, trying to find the person who'd come here with the blade and saved him. However, he was disappointed. No one came after him. Only the blade hovered in the air, trembling faintly. "I knew you'd come." In the distance, Jiangxin came to a stop. His eyes glowed with a strange light as he stared at the bloodbath. "Since you've come all the way here, why don't you show yourself? I'd like to see what kind of person you are." His eyes didn't move. As soon as he finished speaking, he sank into silence. He simply stared indifferently at the long sword. "Jiangxin, do you know the identity of the bloodbath's owner?" Du Xiaofu was rather surprised. In the past, he'd asked Yu Yuqian, Yu Taiyan, and the others about the bloodbath, but none of them had told him anything about its origins or the identity of its owner. Now, it seemed that perhaps Jiangxin had discovered something. Du Xiaofu's interest was boundless. He cast his gaze on the long sword. Swish! Not long after Jiangxin spoke, the bloodbath burst forth with resplendent light. Then, a figure gently walked out of the light. He stepped into the air and stood in front of Du Xiaofu. "Long time no see." It was a man in green robes. When he appeared, he didn't look at Jiangxin. Instead, he faced Du Xiaofu. His lips curved into a smile as he spoke to Du Xiaofu. When he saw this figure, Du Xiaofu was completely stunned. He stared blankly at the man in green robes, unable to speak for a long time. Du Xiaofu couldn't even speak properly. He was truly shocked and felt that the identity of the person who had come was inconceivable. He looked at the man in green robes, then at the long sword beside him. For a moment, his mind couldn't wrap itself around the situation. Du Xiaofu greets Senior Liu. After a long time, Du Xiaofu came to his senses. He bent down and bowed to the man in green robes. How could he not recognize this person? In the past, when he'd been in Divine Martial World, He'd seen this person's incarnation many times. It was none other than the Lord of the 3,000 Sectors, who'd once pursued the demon god to divine martial world, Lu Xiaoyu. Many of his techniques had been taught to him by this man. Lu Xiaoyu's appearance stunned Du Xiaofu. No matter what, Du Xiaofu never would have guessed that the Lord of the 3,000 Sectors was the bloodbath's owner. If that was the case, then Master Yu Yuqian and senior brother Yu Taiyin had both borrowed the bloodbath. Then what was their relationship with Lu Xiaoyu? No wonder. No wonder. No wonder Master and senior brothers were so arrogant. Under the circumstances where Yuqing Divine Kingdom wasn't strong, they didn't take many forces seriously. And back then, the Extermination Spiritual Sanctuary suddenly mobilized thousands of Immortal Realm experts. So the force behind them is the Yunyang sect, which is related to the Lord of the 3,000 Sectors. It was only now that Du Xiaofu understood these questions. Yu Taiyin, Chu Daoju, Long San, Ling Feng, and the others were all very strong. They were backed by the Lingwu world, which was one of the 3,000 Sectors, and looked down on all their opponents. Du Xiaofu had always wanted to see how powerful the Yunyang sect was. However, it was only today that he realized that its strength was far beyond his expectations. The Lord of the 3,000 Sectors. Just thinking about such a background made one's blood boil. They're really good at hiding things. I can't believe I only found out about this now. Du Xiaofu smiled bitterly. He'd asked many times about the bloodbath, the Yunyang sect, and so on, but Yu Taiyin, Yu Yuqian, Chu Daoju, and the others all avoided the important points and dwelled on the trivial. They kept it a secret and didn't tell him. In fact, he knew that those people didn't want him to bite off more than he could chew. That would be detrimental to his cultivation. However, when such a big matter was revealed, it was indeed shocking. Chapter 2861. You don't have to call me senior, I'm your senior. The green-robed man smiled warmly and said to Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu was even more shocked when he heard this. His mind was filled with confusion. He opened his mouth but didn't know what to say. Senior, Du Xiaofu was confused, but it wasn't hard to figure out where this title came from. Ever since he started cultivating, there were only a few masters he had worshipped, and they were none other than Gu Qingyang of Shenwu World's Ancient Heaven Sect, Xiaoho Fenglei and Duamu Qiongtian of Seven Stars Hall, and finally, Yuqing Divine Country's imperial ancestor, Yu Yuqian. Du Xiaofu already knew that Yu Yuqian came from the same sect as the master of the 3,000 boundless worlds in front of him. The other party also said that he was his senior, so other than Yu Yuqian, who else could his master be? After knowing this, Du Xiaofu was speechless. It was no wonder that when he had just become Yu Yuqian's disciple, that old man had always nagged him about wanting him to learn from his senior martial brother, to strive to become a great figure, to stand at the top, and to make the old man proud. At that time, Du Xiaofu was very puzzled. Just who was that senior brother of his? Could it be that he was a powerful meditative realm expert? However, he didn't think too much about it. After all, Yu Yuqian and the others hid it well. They only told him that they had a terrifying senior, so he didn't think too much about it. Today, Du Xiaofu was really shocked. The master of the 3,000 boundless worlds. That was a terrifying master who controlled the entire 3,000 boundless worlds. Du Xiaofu learned from Chu Daoju and the others that the 3,000 boundless worlds were very powerful. Lu Xiaofu's strength was unquestionable. Don't be surprised, there are many things you should know now. But now is not the time to talk. I'll tell you slowly in the future. The green-robed man, Lu Xiaoyu, smiled as he spoke to Du Xiaofu. At the same time, he waved his hand, sending out a wave of light, which transformed into a gentle rain of light that fell upon Du Xiaofu's body. This rain of light contained an incomparably dense mystic energy and had an extremely strong healing effect. In an instant, Du Xiaofu felt as if he was bathing in the warm sunlight. His whole body was indescribably comfortable, and the injuries on his body were rapidly recovering. The recovery speed was 1,000 times faster than the recovery speed of the immortal Shin body. He was shocked for no reason. The master of the 3,000 great worlds. What kind of realm was his senior brother in? This was too terrifying. With just a casual movement of his hand, half of his injuries were instantly healed. However, Lu Xiaoyu didn't look at Du Xiaofu. Instead, he turned to look in Jiangxin's direction. You wanted to see me, so here I am. Lu Xiaoyu spoke softly. His gaze was calm and peaceful. He simply stood there, but he gave off an ethereal and mysterious feeling. It was as if his real body was there, but also as if he was merely a projection of an illusory figure. It was like a dream, unfathomable. Even so, his imposing manner was incomparably valiant. Even in the face of Jiangxin, who'd recovered his meditative state, Lu Xiaoyu's aura was still far more imposing than before. Master of the 3,000 Great Worlds, Lu Xiaoyu. Jiangxin had also recovered his previous calm. His handsome face was expressionless as he said, I didn't expect that after the ancient war, another world would be created. Apart from the one who created it, there's also a rising star like you. How astonishing! He gazed at Lu Xiaoyu. Although his expression was calm, there were ripples in his eyes. Obviously, he was amazed by Lu Xiaoyu. Did you have me appear here just to say this? Lu Xiaoyu's lips were still curved in a smile. He raised his eyebrows and looked at Jiangxin. I knew long ago that I couldn't kill Du Xiaofu. You definitely wouldn't allow me to touch him. Attacking him was just to force you to show yourself. Jiangxin took a step forward and continued, I want to see exactly what kind of enemy I'll be facing in the future. If I have the chance, I'd like to take a trip to the 3,000 Great Worlds. When he finished speaking, Jiangxin's gaze hardened and contained traces of murderous intent. These words were tantamount to a declaration of war against Lu Xiaoyu. If the demons wanted to go to the 3,000 Great Worlds, they naturally wouldn't be guests. They'd definitely lead a large number of experts there and start a bloody massacre. Heh. Lu Xiaoyu suddenly laughed coldly. I'm afraid I'll have to disappoint you. I don't think you'll have the chance to go to the 3,000 Great Worlds. Is that so? Jiangxin's pupils constricted as he countered. His entire body surged with the power of the Great Tao, transforming into a complete set of universal laws. They shook violently, shaking the heavens above and the earth below. Lu Xiaoyu simply stood there, unmoving. In the face of the terrifying power, his body was like a 10,000-year-old pine tree. He stood tall and proud, allowing the storm to batter him without the slightest tremor. What a powerful cultivation! Du Xiaofu was speechless. As he watched the two silently collide, his heart was filled with indescribable shock. As a cultivator of the illusory Tao, of course he could tell how terrifying Jiangxin's aura was. If he stood there, he'd probably be instantly obliterated by the power of the great Tao and die a violent death. However, Lu Xiaoyu didn't even make a move. The boundless waves brushed past him like a gentle breeze. They didn't affect him in the slightest. Even Du Xiaofu, who stood behind him, didn't feel the slightest bit of impact. His bearing alone was enough to surpass Jiangxin's current strength. You and I will fight one day, but not now. At this moment, Lu Xiaoyu spoke again. As soon as he spoke, Jiangxin naturally retracted his aura. Then, he heard the ruler of the 3,000 sectors continue. You need time to recover to your peak strength, and I need to plan how to fight against you. Now is not the time to truly fight. But if you really want to fight, I don't mind suppressing you for an eternity. Lu Xiaoyu's words were very calm. Even when he said the last sentence, there wasn't the slightest ripple of emotion. It was as if he was talking about a trivial matter. However, when Du Xiaofu heard this, it had a different meaning. He could tell that the ruler of the 3,000 sectors was extremely powerful. At the very least, he was far stronger than Jiangxin. Otherwise, how could he suppress him? Jiangxin didn't immediately respond to Lu Xiaoyu. Instead, he looked deeply at Du Xiaofu, then said to Lu Xiaoyu, You're just gambling. If you lose, then whether it's the 33 heavens or the 3,000 sectors, they'll all become the demon race's territory. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly turned and waved his hand at Dongli Qihuang, Chun Yin, and a dozen or so high-level immortal experts. Let's go. Under Jiangxin's lead, a blood-red light soared into the sky, then quickly disappeared without a trace. Only Lu Xiaoyu and Du Xiaofu remained, along with the bloodthirsty saber, which floated in the air and emanated a murderous aura. Say, Senior Brother Lu. When he saw Jiangchen leave, Du Xiaofu walked up to Lu Xiaoyu and bowed respectfully. Regardless of whether or not Jiangchen's seniority was the same as his, Lu Xiaoyu still respected him from the depths of his heart. If it weren't for the green-robed man in front of him, Du Xiaofu wouldn't have been able to achieve what he did today. Little guy, you've done well. You've grown very quickly these past few years. Lu Xiaoyu looked back at Du Xiaofu and smiled. Let's leave this place first. There are some things I should tell you. He reached out and tapped lightly in the air. A speck of starlight slowly appeared. It was incomparably bright and spun continuously. The speck of starlight grew larger and larger until it finally formed a vortex that sucked him and Du Xiaofu in at the same time. This is the starry sky from before. A moment later, Du Xiaofu appeared in another place. It was the boundless starry sky they'd entered through the black hole. Everywhere was deathly still, like a vast graveyard, completely devoid of life. Do you know where that place was? Lu Xiaoyu asked as he hovered in the air, leading Du Xiaofu forward. I don't know. Du Xiaofu shook his head and said bluntly. Lu Xiaoyu was referring to the space where Jiangchen was. When Du Xiaofu arrived in this star region, he, Suimo Yin, Qi Yuanlin, and the others had speculated that this place might have something to do with the 18 layers of hell, but they couldn't be sure. Now that Lu Xiaoyu mentioned it, he would definitely tell him the truth. Perhaps you've also speculated about it? Lu Xiaoyu smiled as he looked at Du Xiaofu. That's where the first layer of the 18 layers of hell is located. The demon god escaped from there. The demon god escaped from there. Du Xiaofu finally understood. So that was the first layer of the 18 layers of hell. No wonder he'd felt a murderous aura when he'd first entered. Moreover, there weren't many powerful existences in that space. Most likely, many experts had been taken away by the demon god, such as the 5 elements demon emperor, the 9 great demon emperors, and so on. Later, during the Archean War, the masters of the 3,000 great worlds, the dragon god, and the others killed them all. The demon god was formed by a wisp of the demon ancestor's primordial spirit. He broke through the first layer of the 18 layers of hell and went to the outside world to wreak havoc. The celestial demon battlefield you went to was at the edge of the first layer of the 18 layers of hell. The demon god tore open the space there and led to the supreme Chong Rong heaven. Lu Xiaoyu continued to speak to Du Xiaofu. Senior brother, if the demon god was formed by a wisp of the demon ancestor's primordial spirit, doesn't that mean that the demon ancestor has other primordial spirits? Du Xiaofu didn't know much about the ancient past. Now that the masters of the 3,000 great worlds were by his side, he took advantage of this opportunity to ask, Senior brother, can you tell me more about it? Don't be impatient. Listen to me slowly, Lu Xiaoyu said with a smile. Then, he tirelessly explained the ancient past. Before the heavens and earth were created, there was chaos. 3,000 celestial demons were born from the chaos. They fought each other and died. Perhaps you've heard of this before. As Lu Xiaoyu spoke, he glanced at Du Xiaofu. When he saw him nod, he continued, in the end, there were only a few celestial demons who broke through the chaos. Pangu, who created the 33 heavens, and the demon ancestor were among them. Because of past grievances, the demon ancestor and Pangu were irreconcilable enemies. The demon ancestor wanted to subvert the 33 heavens through slaughter. It was under these circumstances that the curtains to the great war that occurred after the heavens and earth were created. I won't go into the details of this process. In fact, I've never experienced it. At that time, the 3,000 great worlds didn't exist, and I didn't exist either. However, we can all imagine how tragic it was back then. Later, almost all of the powerhouses of the 33 heavens perished. Even the strongest, Pangu, had to pay such a heavy price to suppress the demon ancestor. His primordial spirit was divided and sealed in the 18 layers of hell. His physical body was sealed in the divine martial world by Emperor Daluo's lifetime of power. This is Jiangchen's origin. He's the demon ancestor's physical body that gave birth to a new spirit and intelligence. Lu Xiaoyu paused for a moment, allowing Du Xiaofu to comprehend a few things on his own. The demon ancestor's primordial spirit was divided into 18 parts and sealed in the 18 layers of hell. His physical body was sealed in the divine martial world by Empyrean Daluo. Pangu and Empyrean Daluo, these two peak existences, have both perished? Du Xiaofu was indescribably shocked. Lu Xiaoyu was clearly telling him that Pangu and Empyrean Daluo had long since ceased to exist. Now, however, the demon ancestor had returned once more. Now that Jiangxin had arrived in the 18 layers of hell, he'd definitely find a way to break through each layer and gather the power of his primordial spirit. Once he succeeded, he'd reach the peak of the demon ancestor's strength. Without Pangu and Empyrean Daluo, who else in the world would be able to subdue the demons? Once the demons launched a bloodbath, the 33 heavens would no longer have a pure land. No one would be able to remain uninvolved. Although the situation is grave, there's no need to worry too early. The 18 layers of hell aren't that easy to break through. The demon ancestor doesn't have the strength to quickly break through Panga's arrangements. He needs time. When he saw Du Xiaofu's worried expression, Lu Xiaoyu patted him on the shoulder. Given my strength, I could have continued to suppress him for eons, but that would have been pointless. If we can't kill the demon ancestor for good, the 33 heavens will eventually face his bloodbath. That's why we need time to arrange a few things so that we can face the final battle and put an end to everything. Is the demon ancestor immortal? Du Xiaofu looked up and asked. Lu Xiaoyu nodded. He understood. Back in the divine martial world, the demon god possessed an immortal body. Even when he'd gone all out, he hadn't been able to kill him. Only Jiangxin, who turned the demon ancestor's physical body into his own, had been able to do so. One could imagine that the demon ancestor himself was an existence that couldn't be killed. In ancient times, Pangu, Lord Daluo, and the others could only separate his physical body and primordial spirit. Then, they divided his primordial spirit into 18 parts and suppressed them separately. However, Du Xiaofu noticed something important. Lu Xiaoyu wanted to put an end to everything and kill the demon ancestor. That made him more alert. As if he knew what he was thinking, Lu Xiaoyu smiled and said, "Hurry up and increase your strength. Killing the demon ancestor is very difficult. You'll need to contribute greatly. If you can't grow quickly, all the arrangements we've made will be for naught." Me? Du Xiaofu was stunned. He didn't understand. His strength had indeed increased quickly, but if he wanted to kill the demon ancestor, would Du Xiaofu be able to play a decisive role? This made him feel somewhat incredulous. He couldn't understand it at all. However, the Lord of the 3,000 upper worlds didn't say much about it. Instead, he changed the topic. He pointed at the vast space of the star zone and said, "This star zone wasn't originally a dead land. It was a world that could give birth to life." "This isn't a dead land?" Du Xiaofu's mouth was wide open. He was shocked once again. Such a vast area was actually once a world. But why had it become completely withered and desolate? It had become a land of death, like a graveyard? If you feel it carefully, it shouldn't be difficult to find that every star has a specific trajectory in its rotation. These trajectories gather a vast amount of energy and head towards an unknown place. Lu Xiaoyu glanced around and said to Du Xiaofu. Du Xiaofu nodded. He had already noticed this when he first arrived. Countless stars drew innumerable trajectories, as if they were drawing some kind of mysterious traces of Dharma and Logos. However, these traces were very deep and obscure, unfathomable. With his current cultivation, it was impossible for him to see through them. The 18 levels of hell rely on these powers to suppress, and the power in this star zone has been consumed over the years. It's almost gone. It won't be easy for the demon ancestor to break through here. However, if we don't plan well, the day he breaks through all 18 levels of hell will be the beginning of a new round of calamity. We're competing with the demon ancestor. Whoever can reach their goal first will have the absolute upper hand. Young Master Lu tried to persuade her, but he couldn't help but have a serious expression on his face. The sealing power of the 18 levels of hell was being greatly consumed. It was about to reach its end. That was why the demon ancestor had the confidence to break through each level. Therefore, both sides needed time to complete their plans. "Is the key still me?" Du Xiaofu mumbled with a heavy heart. "Like I said, you don't need to worry too early. There are many things you don't need to worry about yet. There are experts who will make the necessary arrangements. What you need to do is work hard to improve yourself. Lu Xiaoyu reined in his emotions and said, I understand. Du Xiaofu nodded solemnly. He believed that if Jiangxin broke through the 18 levels of hell and merged all of his primordial spirits, his strength would surpass the meditative realm. He didn't know which of the 9 great realms he'd reach, Dao Carrier or Avatar. As a Void Dao realm cultivator, Lu Xiaoyu was far too weak. If he worried too much, he'd be possessed. Don't think too much. I'll take you somewhere. Lu Xiaoyu interrupted Du Xiaofu's train of thought. Where are we going? Du Xiaofu was puzzled. A world called Earth. Chapter 2862. As Lu Xiaoyu spoke, he gently waved his arm. A crack in the void appeared in front of the two of them, leading to an unknown place. Du Xiaofu followed closely behind and stepped in, disappearing together. When they walked out again, they found themselves in a grotesque place. This mini-world actually has living creatures? Du Xiaofu said with some surprise, his face filled with disbelief. It was not difficult for him to discover that he was still in the boundless star field from before. However, he was extremely far away from his previous position. In the surroundings, there were still countless lonely stars circling around, drawing mysterious trajectories. However, in the center of these lonely stars, there was a world, and there were many living creatures moving about in it. This is a mini-world. It is extremely inferior to the vast majority of the worlds in the 33 heavens. Lu Xiaoyu brought Du Xiaofu to this mini-world and said softly, however, this is the center of the entire star field. All the stars revolve around it. This mini-world is actually the center of the entire star field? Du Xiaofu's eyes widened. He did not know what to say. Lu Xiaoyu's words shocked him. Although this star field was a land of death without any life, the world under his feet could not be any smaller. Not to mention compared to the 33 heavens, it could not even be compared to the small worlds in the 33 heavens. Such a small world was actually the center of the entire star field? However, after thinking about it, he understood. No matter what, this was the only place of life in the entire star field. There is something special about this place. You can carefully experience it. Lu Xiaoyu did not explain much and only said this to Du Xiaofu. What is special about it? Du Xiaofu muttered and began to carefully observe this world. The life force here was extremely weak and the spiritual energy was so thin that it made one's hair stand on end. All the living creatures here had no cultivation. The strongest were humans, but there was not a single cultivator here. However, Du Xiaofu discovered some strange things. Although the living creatures in this world could not cultivate, there were many strange and mystical things. Not too far away from where he stood, a large bird-like object flew past. Its entire body was made of metal and its speed was extremely fast, bringing with it a loud rumbling sound. And in the belly of this large bird, there were many humans sitting there, all of them very comfortable. This thing is called an airplane. Lu Xiaoyu explained in a timely manner. He smiled faintly, as if he was reminiscing about the past. Du Xiaofu nodded and looked at the ground once more. What made him feel even more incredulous was that the roads of the 33 heavens and heavens, the roads, were like dragons. Dragons, they intersecting and intersecting. The roads. On the roads, there were massive amounts of metal objects flying past, like iron boxes. In the distance, with a single glance, one could see a large number of buildings standing in rows. All of this left Du Xiaofu feeling a sense of novelty. This small world really isn't simple. Mortals cannot cultivate, but it seems as if they have opened up a completely different scene. His heart shook. In such a miniature world, the strength that the living creatures grasped was extremely weak. But the situation they created was countless times more wonderful than the world of cultivation. In truth, there are even more inconceivable things here. The corners of Lu Xiaoyu's mouth were still smiling. Then, he looked at Du Xiaofu and said, however, these inconceivable things are relatively unimportant. Put aside the mortal world and carefully experience it. Try to see if you can trigger some fluctuations. Could there be other mysteries in this place? Du Xiaofu was puzzled, but he still did as Lu Xiaoyu said. He spread out the power of his primordial spirit and permeated every corner of this world. He was meticulous. With the passage of time, he slowly closed his eyes and focused on perceiving his surroundings. As expected, after a long time, Du Xiaofu finally caught a strand of abnormal fluctuation. The result made his heart almost jump out of his chest. I seem to sense that this world is breathing. He was so shocked that he could not be any more shocked. He could not help but widen his eyes and stare at Lu Xiaoyu. This was too unbelievable. How could a world breathe? Everyone knew that everything in the world was derived from the Great Path. As a world, it carried the power of the four primordial laws. However, it was not a living creature. Under the circumstances that it did not have life, how could it breathe like a living creature? This made Du Xiaofu extremely puzzled. However, just as he sensed the fluctuation of the life qi, he was unable to pry any deeper. This world seemed to have a very strong consciousness. With his current cultivation, he could not obtain any more information at all. You're not wrong. This world is indeed breathing. Lu Xiaoyu nodded and said. The power of the breathing was extremely weak, but at their level, they could feel it if they were serious. Does this mini-world really have an independent life? Du Xiaofu became more and more puzzled, but Lu Xiaoyu did not answer his doubts. You'll naturally know the details in the future. The reason I brought you here is to let you experience this world. When we fight the devil ancestor in the future, this might become a key place. Lu Xiaoyu's expression became more serious as he told Du Xiaofu. A key place to fight the devil ancestor? Du Xiaofu understood and did not ask further. He trusted his senior brother very much. There must be a reason why he did not say anything. It's good for you to understand these things for the time being. Right now, the most important thing for you is to constantly improve yourself. We're still waiting for you to contribute to the battle in the future. Don't make me wait too long. Lu Xiaoyu looked at Du Xiaofu and said calmly. Du Xiaofu nodded heavily and then suddenly asked, Senior brother, I have many doubts about the current virtual path realm. I wonder if senior brother can explain it to me? It had not been long since he stepped into the virtual path realm in the divine demon war boundary. However, he merely knew the name of the realm he was at now, and he didn't know anything about what the so-called Void Dao realm was or which direction he should head towards. This made Du Xiaofu feel very helpless. In the 33 heavens, it seemed that no one had reached the virtual path realm since ancient times. There was no hope of finding someone to ask for advice. And now, the Lord of the 3,000 great worlds was in front of him. Du Xiaofu did not know the specific cultivation of his senior brother, but he could definitely stand among the strongest in the 33 heavens. If he asked him about these doubts, he should be able to obtain some results. Therefore, after asking the question, Du Xiaofu could not help but hope to hear a useful answer. It's just as you said. The realm you're currently at is called the Void Dao realm. Lu Xiaoyu didn't hesitate, as if he had already expected that Du Xiaofu would ask him this question. He said, This realm can only be reached when the 33 heavens were first opened. Only those born from the heavens and earth could possibly reach this realm. At that time, the great Dao had just formed. The laws were not fixed, and order was just born. It was naturally much easier for living beings to explore the laws of heaven and earth. It's like drawing a painting. Of course, it's not easy to draw according to the sample, but if you can see every stroke, it'll be much easier if you draw it yourself. Du Xiaofu had heard this principle from Suimo Yin and the others. In the process of the laws of heaven and earth being born, it was naturally easier to pry into the mysterious trajectory than now that the laws were formed and the greater world was stabilized. The foundation of the virtual path realm is to grasp the four great primitive laws at the same time, and you have done it. Lu Xiaoyu glanced at Du Xiaofu with a glowing expression, looking very satisfied. And the reason why it is called the Void Dao is because in this realm, under the fusion and interweaving of the four great primordial laws, it can naturally evolve into Dao runes. This Dao rhythm does not contain the great Dao origin, so it is called the virtual path realm. I see. Du Xiaofu nodded. Only now did he truly know the origin of the name virtual path. He thought for a while and said, Actually, it is all thanks to the Void 8 trigrams that senior brother taught me. Otherwise, it would be very difficult for me to integrate the 4 great primitive laws. These words were very serious, expressing his most sincere gratitude to this senior brother. With the help of the Void 8 trigrams, Du Xiaofu really began to try to integrate the 4 great primitive laws. Otherwise, who knew how many detours he would have taken? Ha ha ha! Lu Xiaoyu suddenly laughed, shook his head and said, "The world's laws are nothing more than Tai Chi, Yin Yang, 4 symbols, 8 trigrams. According to this logic, with your talent, it is not difficult to find the way to integrate the 4 great primitive laws. However, it just so happens that the Void 8 trigrams allowed you to take a shortcut, so you don't need to go out of your way to comprehend it. Even without this method, I believe that you can find other paths on your own." Du Xiaofu touched his nose and did not say anything. He only took it that his senior brother was praising him. If you want to know the specifics of the virtual path realm, I can indeed tell you. Lu Xiaoyu opened his mouth and then said, "There is no specific division of small realms in the virtual path realm. This is different from other cultivation realms. However, it can be roughly divided into 3 processes, namely, condensing and tracing the Tao, transforming into the Tao, and carrying the Tao with one's body. Condensing and tracing the Tao is to use the power of the 4 great primitive laws to trace back to the origin of the laws and produce the Tao rhythm, which is the level you are currently at. Transforming into the Tao, the origin of the laws is complete, and the Tao rhythm is formed naturally. Tracing back to the origin of the great Tao is similar to the cultivation of the meditative path realm. Carrying the Tao with one's body is to break through the virtual path realm, break through the shackles of the great thousand worlds, and achieve the Tao-carrying body. At that time, it will be a brand new world, and you can truly create the great thousand worlds. Condensing and tracing the Tao, transforming into the Tao, and carrying the Tao with one's body. Du Xiaofu muttered these words, savoring them carefully. With Lu Xiaoyu's explanation, it was not difficult for him to understand these 3 processes. Even if he followed the literal meaning, he could still think about it. Condensing and tracing the Tao, condensing and tracing the Tao. He condensed the 4 great primitive laws and made them one, naturally giving birth to the origin of the laws, and at the same time producing the Tao rhythm. It was precisely this principle. Transforming into the Tao was to grasp the complete origin of the laws. At that time, the Tao rhythm would be complete, and he would need to seek a transformation to transform the Tao rhythm into the origin of the great Tao, which was the same as the pursuit of the meditative path realm cultivators. Carrying the Tao with one's body was a little vague, and Du Xiaofu could not understand it, because that was already the Tao-carrying realm. Of the 9 great realms of the 33 heavens, the Tao-carrying realm and the formless realm only existed in legends, and were far from what the current Du Xiaofu could touch. However, he was very curious about these 2 realms, and could not help but ask. Lu Xiaoyu did not hide it, and said directly, "Living beings are born between heaven and earth, and they are also derived from the great Tao. However, if you want to trace back to the supreme great Tao, not only do you have to grasp the origin of the great Tao, you also have to transform your body into the Tao. However, the great Tao does not tolerate blasphemy. At the same time that all living beings have spirits, they will also be supported by extremely strong shackles by the great Tao. Only by breaking free of these shackles and achieving one's own Tao would one be able to achieve the Tao-carrying realm. So that's how it is." Du Xiaofu frowned lightly as he pondered carefully. The Tao-carrying realm was extremely profound. Not only did one have to carry the Tao with one's body, one also had to refine one's own Tao and achieve the Tao-carrying realm. One could imagine that when one attained such a level, one could be considered the strongest living being in the world, and every move one made would contain a terrifying Tao that could suppress and flatten everything. Then what about the formless realm? Du Xiaofu puckered his lips and asked once more. The formless realm. When he spoke of this realm, Lu Xiaoyu's gaze became slightly erratic, and he seemed to be slightly lost in thought as he said, "According to the literal meaning, it is formless and formless, as if one is not a person of the world, truly free from all the shackles of the great Tao of heaven and earth, and no matter which world one walks in, one would not be disturbed or affected by the great Tao. At the same time, One can carry out the act of splitting the world apart in the formless realm and become the ruler of the vast world, an existence like Pangu. The great god Pangu is the formless realm. Du Xiaofu nodded. This saying was extremely reasonable. As the great god Pangu that was born from chaos and later split the world apart, only then did the existence of the 33 heavens exist. His realm was the highest level among the 9 great realms, so it was naturally reasonable and reasonable. Formless and formless, as if one is not a person of the world, free from all the shackles of the great Tao of heaven and earth. How delightful and unrestrained is that! Du Xiaofu muttered to himself, and he started to yearn greatly. Wasn't the goal of the people of the world to obtain formidable strength? If one was able to break free from all shackles, even the great Tao of heaven and earth would be unable to do anything to one. This was a true figure at the apex. At the same time, the formless realm could even split the world apart and achieve a world that completely belonged to oneself. This kind of action would make countless people envious. The gap between the carrier realm and the formless realm is like a natural chasm, but in reality, it's only a single step away. Lu Xiaofu spoke once more, but when he spoke these words, there was an indescribable feeling of sigh. That single step is capable of trapping one for eternity, and it's difficult to find the opportunity to break through. Du Xiaofu couldn't help but nod when he heard this. In fact, when living beings cultivated, the breakthrough of every realm was like a game, a struggle with the world, the great Tao, the laws, and so on and so forth. Not to mention the final manifestation realm. Even if it was only a step away from the Tao-bearer realm, it was absolutely impossible to easily traverse it. That tiny step was like a shapeless barrier that lay across there, and it was even vaster than a natural chasm. I wonder what realm senior brother is at now. Du Xiaofu suddenly raised his brows and asked Lu Xiaofu, could it be the formless realm? According to some guesses he made, the cultivation of this senior brother of his was surely extremely terrifying. Not to mention anything else, merely his identity as the master of the 3,000 worlds was absolutely not weak. It was precisely because of this that Du Xiaofu guessed that the 3,000 worlds were established by Lu Xiaofu. I know what you're thinking, but you're thinking a bit too much. Lu Xiaofu suddenly laughed bitterly, and then he glanced at Du Xiaofu and said, I obtained an enormous benefit by chance, and that's how I became the master of the 3,000 worlds. This identity represents that I'm the strongest living being in the 3,000 worlds, but that vast world wasn't established by me. Up until now, only the few fiend gods that broke through the chaos are capable of possessing a true formless realm expert. Du Xiaofu came to an understanding when he heard such an explanation. It turned out that he was really thinking too much. He thought that this senior brother of his was so awesome that he had already reached the peak, achieved the formless body, and established a vast world. Yes, Master Yu Yuqian, Chu Daoju, and the Cloudy Sun sect were all born in the 3,000 worlds, and they were born many years earlier than senior brother Lu. The 3,000 worlds were naturally born earlier. From a chronological point of view, his conjecture was completely illogical. Du Xiaofu rubbed his nose. It seemed that no matter if it was the 33 heavens or the 3,000 boundless worlds, after the creation of the heavens and earth, no one had reached the imageless realm. Only the gods and devils that walked out of the primal chaos had such great power. It was no wonder that when the demon ancestor wreaked havoc in the 33 heavens, only Pangu, Heavenly Lord Daluo, and the others could truly compete with him. It was just that he didn't know if Heavenly Lord Daluo was a creature of the chaos. If he was, why couldn't he leave behind a vast world? No matter what, senior brother should at least be an expert at the 3rd stage of meditative oblivion, looking through reincarnation, right? Du Xiaofu blinked his eyes and looked at Lu Xiaoyu as he spoke. He felt that this speculation was more reasonable. To be able to become the strongest person in the 3,000 worlds, perhaps he was at the peak of the 3rd stage of meditative oblivion. Looking through reincarnation? Take a guess. Lu Xiaoyu suddenly laughed and winked at Du Xiaofu, keeping him in suspense. Du Xiaofu felt suffocated and was speechless. He didn't ask further on this question. Instead, his face turned serious as he said to Lu Xiaoyu, Senior brother, I'm afraid I need your help with something. Junior brother, feel free to speak your mind. Lu Xiaoyu looked at him and said straightforwardly. Chapter 28:63. When I left the divine martial world for the 33 heavens, there were 7 people with me. However, I was separated from the others because of the combined forces of the school of legalism, the school of famers, and the school of vertical and horizontal. Even now, little Xingxing and little Yao's whereabouts are still unknown. Du Xiaofu looked at Lu Xiaoyu with a grave expression. Senior brother, do you have a way to find them? He was extremely worried. Several hundred years had passed, but there had been no news of little Xingxing and Du Xiaoyao. The Yuqing Divine Kingdom had sent people to search for them, but there had been no progress. They didn't even know if they were dead or alive. At this moment, Du Xiaofu asked Lu Xiaoyu this question mainly because of little Xingxing. She was the daughter of the Dragon God, and the Dragon God had a close relationship with the Master of the 3,000 Worlds. If he took action, it might be of greater use. In reality, the disappearance of little Xingxing and Du Xiaoyao had already become a sore point for Du Xiaofu. He often thought about it and found it difficult to calm down. So that's what you wanted to talk about? Lu Xiaoyu smiled gently and looked at Du Xiaofu. Actually, even if you didn't ask, I was going to tell you. His expression was very calm, without the slightest hint of worry. It was as if he had always been very confident. Senior brother, do you know where they are? Du Xiaofu raised his eyebrows and asked nervously. At the same time, he stared at the master of the 3,000 sectors in front of him. He wanted to hear an affirmative answer. Haha! Lu Xiaoyu laughed again and said to Du Xiaofu, how could I not pay attention when Little Long's daughter came to the 33 heavens? He smiled meaningfully and looked at Du Xiaofu's anxious expression. He seemed to want to amuse him. Where are they? Du Xiaofu was helpless when faced with Lu Xiaoyu's gaze. He could only step forward and ask urgently. He was very clear about the relationship between his senior brother and little Xingxing. After hearing what he said, he actually felt a lot more at ease. However, he was still eager to know the whereabouts of little Xingxing and Du Xiaoyao. Du Xiaofu hadn't seen them for many years, and he didn't know how they were doing now, whether they had made any progress in their cultivation, or whether they had encountered any difficulties. All of these had been on Du Xiaofu's mind all year round. Don't worry, they are fine right now. They all had great opportunities. Lu Xiaoyu stopped joking with Du Xiaofu. He walked up to him and patted Du Xiaofu's shoulder. Phew! Du Xiaofu finally let out a long sigh of relief. Hearing that the two of them were safe, he could finally put down the burden in his heart. A smile finally appeared on his face, but his eyes were still fixed on Lu Xiaoyu. It turned out that not only were little Xingxing and little Yao's lives not in danger, they had actually obtained a huge opportunity. Presumably, after so many years, the strength of those two must have advanced by leaps and bounds. Du Xiaofu was looking forward to it. He didn't know what kind of realm they had reached today. Little Xingxing and your brother Du Xiaoyao are currently in Yinxiong Wu Tian. It's about time for them to come out of seclusion. If you want to see them as soon as possible, I can send you there directly. Lu Xiaoyu said to Du Xiaofu indifferently. Of course I want to see them. The sooner the better. Du Xiaofu nodded affirmatively and immediately said. Those two were his closest relatives. After not seeing them for so many years, Du Xiaofu also missed them very much. Perhaps now, little Xingxing had already grown up and was no longer as childish as before. In addition, he didn't know if Du Xiaoyao was still the same as before, and if she had restrained her naturally restless personality. All right, I'll send you there. It just so happens that they will face some trouble after they come out of seclusion. When the time comes, you can also help them. It will save me and Little Dragon a trip. Lu Xiaoyu readily agreed and said. Du Xiaofu was exceptionally happy. If senior brother could send him there, it would save him a lot of effort. It had been too many years since he had seen little Xingxing and Du Xiaoyao. Thinking that he would be able to see them soon, Du Xiaofu couldn't help but look forward to it. With that, Du Xiaofu didn't ask any more questions. Instead, he left the small world with Lu Xiaoyu and went deep into the star domain. He let Suimo Yin, Qi Yuanlin, Lin Kaiyun, Xiao Yun and the others out of the ancient barren space. After some discussion, they found out what had happened after Du Xiaofu had kept them in the ancient barren space. Du Xiaofu also introduced Lu Xiaoyu. However, he only said that Lu Xiaoyu was his senior brother and didn't say anything else. Everyone, I have important matters to attend to in the outside world. I won't be returning to the celestial demon battlefield. I have many disciples from Yuqing Holy Kingdom. Please take care of them. Du Xiaofu cupped his fists and said solemnly to the holy sons and holy daughters of the various holy lands. He couldn't wait to see little Xingxing and Du Xiaoyao. He didn't want to return to the celestial demon battlefield. Furthermore, after going through the battle with the demon clan, he felt more at ease to entrust Yu Qingyin, Yu Qingyao, He Zhibai, Fan Yushu, and the other disciples of the Holy Kingdom to them. This matter is naturally not a problem. We will definitely take good care of them for you. Xiao Yun frowned slightly and asked, however, Brother Du, if you don't return to the celestial demon battlefield, how will you go to the outside world? He didn't understand. Everyone had come from the supreme Changrong sky. They could only go to the outside world if they returned to the celestial demon battlefield. If Du Xiaofu didn't return, how was he going to do anything? Also, after we entered the gate of hell, we entered this star domain. We can't even find the way back. Suemo Yin said with a wry smile. The blood-red light in the depths of the celestial demon battlefield had already disappeared. They couldn't find the way back. If they couldn't return to the celestial demon battlefield, they wouldn't be able to help Du Xiaofu no matter how much they wanted to. It's all right. My senior brother Lu will bring me there. He will also open a path and send you all back to the celestial demon battlefield. Du Xiaofu said and dispelled everyone's doubts. With the help of the master of the 3,000 great cosmos, Lu Xiaoyu, these problems would naturally be solved. It would be difficult to trap him anywhere in the 33 heavens. Yuqing Emperor's senior brother, Du Xiaofu's words surprised the holy sons and holy daughters of the various holy lands. At this moment, everyone had the same thought in their hearts. The senior brother Lu that Du Xiaofu spoke of was definitely a terrifying person. However, no one asked further. Everyone present was an outstanding talent, and their minds were incomparably flexible. If Du Xiaofu was willing to tell them, he would definitely tell them directly. If they rashly questioned him, it would be a little too impolite. Furthermore, there shouldn't be any more powerful demon tribes appearing in the celestial demon battlefield. You all can rest assured and train. Some of the forgotten experts of the transcendent Changrong heaven have already been alerted. They will be constantly monitoring the movements in the celestial demon battlefield. Du Xiaofu then added and said to everyone. He had heard this from his senior brother. It was very important and could not be faked. However, when the young experts heard these words, they were even more shocked. Du Xiaofu only came from a small holy kingdom. Even the disciples of the powerful holy lands did not know that their patriarchs had been alerted. How did he know? All right, I will send you all back to the celestial demon battlefield. Lu Xiaoyu said at the right time and did not say anything else. He stretched out his hand and pointed at the void. A space path was formed that was suffused with a pitch-black light and led to an unknown place. Suemo Yin, Qi Yuanlin, Lin Kaiyun, Xiao Yun and the others did not delay and entered in a single file. The moment before the space path was sealed, Xiao Yun transmitted his voice into Du Xiaofu's ears. Brother Du, your senior brother should be very powerful. When Du Xiaofu heard this, a smile appeared on his face. Senior brother Lu was the ruler of the 3,000 great worlds. With his saber, he was able to force the forgotten ancestor of the Taisher demon dragon tribe to retreat. How could such a person not be powerful? At the same time, Du Xiaofu thought of many other things. When he first arrived at the 33 heavens, he met Elder Kong in the chaotic space. When he heard Elder Kong mention his master, Yu Yuqian, his words were filled with envy and jealousy. In Elder Kong's eyes, Old Man Yu was a complete nouveau riche who had countless treasures in his hands. His talent was extremely poor, but he relied on sky treasures to push his cultivation to the immortal realm. Now that he thought about it, all of this could be explained. Old Man Yu was the master of the 3,000 great worlds. How could he lack any cultivation resources? Moreover, Du Xiaofu could imagine that the bottle of azure dragon blood essence that his master Yu Yuqian had given him must be extremely pure. The azure spirit armor refined from it would be extremely powerful. It would be no different from a real azure dragon. Perhaps that blood essence was obtained from little Xingxing's father, the dragon god. Little Xingxing, little Yao, I'm coming. Wait for me. Du Xiaofu watched the holy sons and holy daughters of the various holy lands leave. Then, he asked senior brother Lu Xiaoyu to send him to the Yinxiong flawless sky to look for little Xingxing and Du Xiaoyao. Of course, before that, he also asked some questions about the situation of the other world. Swoosh, a void passage was opened, directly connecting this desolate star field to another world. Du Xiaofu shuttled through it at high speed and soon entered a different space. With senior brother's help, he naturally arrived in an instant. It was much faster than using a wormhole to travel. Du Xiaofu had seen Shueisha perform this kind of skill once when he was surrounded by countless beasts in the Qian Su Jinghua heaven. Therefore, he was no longer as shocked as he was at that time. In Qiong flawless sky, Du Xiaofu's eyes glowed as he began to size up everything around him. He knew that the place he was in was one of the great worlds of the 33 heavens, the Yinxiong flawless sky. The living beings in it were powerful and were not inferior to the supreme Changrong heaven. Chapter 2864. When Du Xiaofu entered the Yinxiong boundless heaven, Lu Xiaoyu, the lord of the 3,000 great worlds, stood tall. With a swoosh, a golden light suddenly bloomed in the void beside Lu Xiaoyu. Then, a man in a golden robe walked out from it and came to Lu Xiaoyu's side, standing side by side with him. The golden-robed young man was handsome and had a natural charm to him. He had a strange smile on his face. Xiaolong, you're here. Lu Xiaoyu turned to look at the newcomer and smiled faintly. Boss, that brat Du Xiaofu left? Xiaolong looked at the man in green and asked with raised eyebrows. He left. Lu Xiaoyu nodded and said, This kid is not bad. He's loyal and affectionate. I sent him to the Yinxiong boundless heaven to find your daughter and that little brother of his. Sigh. I haven't really met that child, little Xingxing. Do you think I should make a trip there and bring her back? Xiaolong suddenly sighed softly, and a guilty look appeared on his face. He smiled bitterly and said, Chinzi has been causing more and more trouble these years. She trusts her daughter too much. I can't take it anymore. You can go and meet her. After all, you've been separated for so many years. Bring Chinzi along. Lu Xiaoyu nodded again and continued, But you don't have to rush. Little Xingxing is in some trouble now. Although it's a small problem for us, it's not easy for them to solve. The reason I sent my junior brother over is to let him gain more experience. Perhaps there really isn't much time left. As he spoke, a trace of worry appeared between his brows. He was not as calm as he usually was. I understand. Xiaolong opened his mouth and continued, This matter is indeed quite troublesome for them. Even if that brat Du Xiaofu comes out personally, he definitely won't be able to solve it. I'll make arrangements first. There can't be any accidents. Lu Xiaoyu did not say anything else and only nodded silently in agreement. Boss, are we really not going to take action to suppress the evil ancestor first? If we allow him to do as he pleases, it won't be good if he overreaches himself. Xiaolong suddenly raised his eyes, looked at Lu Xiaoyu with a burning gaze, and said, If we suppress it now, even if it will resurrect many years later, we can buy a lot of time for Du Xiaofu to grow up. At that time, it will be easier to deal with the demon race. I've thought about that as well, but there's no difference in doing that, is there? Lu Xiaoyu glanced at Xiaolong and said, My junior brother wants to grow quickly, so I need to give him some pressure. This is not a bad thing. The more we push him, the more unexpected things he might have to worry about. That's right. The strong grow up under cruel tempering. The devil race is extremely terrifying, but to that brat, it is indeed an opportunity to temper himself. Xiaolong nodded his head and said, The fiend ancestor has already broken through the second level of hell and fused with the power of a second primordial spirit. Right now, he's breaking through the third level of hell. Once he breaks through half of the 18 levels of hell, he will recover at least 30% of his strength from the ancient times. At that time, he will be very difficult to deal with. I hope that brat Du Xiaofu can reach new heights soon. Lu Xiaoyu's eyes moved slightly as he muttered, I think he can do it. After all these years, he has never disappointed you. During the great calamity of the devil religion in Shenwu world, he even managed to kill the devil god. This time, that brat might bring us a pleasant surprise. Xiaolong's lips curled into a smile again as he said, "That's right." He even fused with the world origin of Shenwu world. If such a person cannot grow, then it doesn't make sense at all. Lu Xiaoyu also smiled and said so. That world is becoming more and more amazing. Before I came here, I even want to check it out. At this time, in terms of scale, it has already expanded by thousands of times. The spiritual energy is dense, and the suppressive force is getting weaker and weaker. All of this is about to catch up with the 33 heavens. Xiaolong suddenly felt a little emotional and praised. Moreover, in that desolate country, there are already several people who are beginning to break through to the true severing realm. This kind of change is really inconceivable. That Shenwu world is similar to our Lingwu world. It's just that in the ancient times, that world has experienced more calamities and tribulations. A huge world has finally become a small world. Heavenly Lord Daluo's methods have been left behind since ancient times and are still effective even now. Lu Xiaoyu nodded and said in agreement, "Isn't that so? When we chased the devil god there, we were suppressed to such a state. From this, it can be seen how fierce Heavenly Lord Daluo was back then." Xiaolong still had a look of shock as he smacked his lips and said, "What a pity. Such a terrifying expert fell. Too many experts fell in the ancient demonic war. It wasn't just Heavenly Lord Daluo alone. Even a peerless existence like the great god Pangu couldn't really kill the devil ancestor." Lu Xiaoyu's expression became a little more serious. Then, he suddenly retracted his gaze and looked into the distance as if he was looking through the void and arrived at a small world in this star field. That was the place he had brought Du Xiaofu to previously, a world called Earth. Lu Xiaoyu turned to look at Xiaolong and said, "Let's not talk about this first. Since we're here, let's go there and take a look. I haven't been there for many years, so I still miss it." Lu Xiaoyu couldn't help but have a look of nostalgia in his eyes as he spoke. "That's Boss's hometown. I'll accompany Boss to take a look." Xiaolong said leisurely, "We can also go and pay our respects to the great god Pangu. After all, he was the first person to walk out of the chaos." Lu Xiaoyu listened to these words and nodded silently. Although he had never seen the great god Pangu with his own eyes and had never experienced the terrifying demonic war in ancient times, just hearing about the many deeds of the past was enough to make people feel a strong sense of reverence. Now, the devil ancestor had made a comeback and intended to plunge the world into a bloodbath again, sweeping up the sky with the smell of blood. Pangu was no longer around, so the heavy responsibility of fighting against the devil race was naturally shouldered by the younger generation. Of course, he could suppress the devil ancestor before he recovered, again and again, and the cycle would continue forever. However, this was not enough to completely kill him. However, this world was filled with many variables. If the devil ancestor escaped his control one day, then the situation would be unsalvageable. After all, characters like the great god Pangu and Heavenly Lord Daluo could not be resurrected to fight again. At the same time, the energy of the 18 layers of hell would be exhausted to the extreme. It would be difficult for anyone in this world to set up such a vast array to suppress the devil ancestor again and again. What followed was the deaths of even more living beings and even more top-notch experts due to the devil race. Therefore, now it was necessary to coordinate the layout and plan in order to get rid of the devil ancestor once and for all. "Let's go." Lu Xiaoyu withdrew his gaze, glanced at the golden-robed man beside him, and said aloud. Immediately, the two did not hesitate any longer. The two figures gradually faded from the void, leaving behind only the stars that revolved in the sky, drawing mysterious trajectories. On the other side, after Du Xiaofu entered the Yinxiong boundless heaven, he made some inquiries and hurried toward his destination. The place he wanted to go was a place called the Burial Sky Mountain. As for little Xingxing and Du Xiaoyao, both of them had quite a great opportunity in this place. However, Lu Xiaoyu had never told him what kind of opportunity it was. However, Du Xiaofu had some understanding of the situation in this world. Back then, after little Xingxing, Du Xiaoyao, Ouyang Shuang, and the other three little guys were separated from him, they were besieged by the legalism, the school of famous people, and the school of vertical and horizontal. They had no choice but to split up again, allowing Ouyang Shuang to escape with Du Xiaoba, Du Xiaohuang, and Du Xiaolin. They wandered outside for a long time, and finally fell into the Qian Su Jinghua heaven, where they were besieged by many beasts. Little Xingxing and Du Xiaoyao, on the other hand, risked their lives and were seriously injured. They were chased into a terrifying void storm by the people of the three great families, and only then did they escape. Lu Xiaoyu had told Du Xiaofu that, in fact, when he was in the divine martial world, Du Xiaofu had been paying attention to him, and it was even more impossible to hide from him when he left that world and came to the 33 heavens. The reason why he did not make a move was because he wanted to let them experience more trials. The void storm that little Xingxing and Du Xiaoyao experienced was created by him, and the purpose was to let them enter the Yinxiong boundless heaven to seek opportunities. It could be said that everything was under his control. All the hardships that little Xingxing and Du Xiaoyao experienced were only for training and would not endanger their lives. However, in the Yinxiong boundless heaven, there are people who want to take advantage of little Xingxing and little Yao. Du Xiaofu's eyes flickered, and a wisp of ferocious aura was brewing. He raised his head and looked ahead. There was a continuous mountain range there, winding and undulating. Looking from the sky, it looked like a large bird lying on the ground. The entire mountain range was fluctuating with a fierce aura, and a blazing aura was emitted. Moreover, at this moment, patches of resplendent light rushed into the sky, and the fiery light was bright red. Before they really got close, Du Xiaofu could already feel the heat, and it was difficult to resist. This fluctuation was unusual, and had already lasted for several years. It was as if a rare treasure had appeared, or some kind of great benefit had appeared, and it made people's hearts yearn for it. It was also because of this that such a disturbance had attracted many experts of this world, and they had been spying on it all this time. However, they were intimidated by that terrifying energy, and even the immortal realm experts did not dare to approach it directly and could only observe from the outside. One could imagine that if this fluctuation calmed down one day, these people would rush in without hesitation to seek opportunities. Chapter 2865. There really are a lot of people here. Du Xiaofu looked around and saw that a large number of experts had appeared in the periphery of Burial Sky Mountain. There were humans, beasts, and demons, and they filled the sky. Moreover, the cultivation of those who came here was very strong. Most of them were in the immortal realm. Although there were many existences below the truth-severing realm, they could only watch from the sidelines. They didn't have the strength to enter the competition later. Du Xiaofu had done some research before coming here, so he knew a little about Burial Sky Mountain. This was a forbidden area that had existed since ancient times. No one, including people from Yinxiong Wuzhou Heaven and the other 33 heavens, had set foot in it since ancient times. It was rumored that this forbidden area had something to do with the War of the Demons during the time of eternity. A great figure was buried in this mountain range, thus forming a strange area that contained endless dangers. Not to mention the ordinary powerhouses, even those in the meditative realm would not dare to rashly enter this place. For many years, there was no lack of daring people who tried to enter Burial Sky Mountain in search of opportunities and benefits. However, without exception, no one came out alive. The fate of these people could be imagined. However, a few years ago, this area began to undergo a special change. Waves of fierce fluctuations spread out from it, vast and mighty in the void, attracting the attention of countless experts in this world. I'm afraid that an ancient item will appear. This was everyone's guess. Everyone could imagine that a fierce land left behind from ancient times suddenly had a huge movement. It was definitely extraordinary. Recently, the commotion had become increasingly great. Countless experts had gathered here, and it was precisely because of this that Du Xiaofu felt quite a bit of seriousness. After all, he was alone here, so it might not be so easy for him to take little Xingxing and Du Xiaoyao away. However, Du Xiaofu wasn't particularly anxious. After all, everything was arranged by senior brother Lu Xiaoyu. He should have thought of this situation and definitely had a backup plan. Let's wait first. It won't be long. Du Xiaofu landed in the void, found a place, and sat down cross-legged. He closed his eyes slightly and entered a shallow cultivation state. He planned to wait here for little Xingxing and Du Xiaoyao. After not seeing them for hundreds of years, he missed them very much. Under such circumstances, time passed by slowly, and a month quickly passed. Du Xiaofu didn't ask about the things in the outside world and only waited quietly. During this period of time, more and more experts had rushed over to the vicinity of Burial Mountain, and all of them gazed with burning gazes at the gorgeous scene on the mountain range. Look, there's movement again. On this day, an expert was suddenly shocked. He pointed in the mountain range. The mountain. Under everyone's eyes, thousands of rays rushed out of the mountain range, the sky, and filled the void. Calm rumble. All of a sudden, the entire mountain range began to tremble violently. It trembled incessantly, and an earth-shaking rumble erupted, causing the ears of many experts to become muddled. Coo! A sound that was like the cry of a phoenix swept out, and it carried an extremely terrifying pressure. It brazenly pressed down on the soul spirits of all living beings, causing their bodies to shake violently and almost fall down. This terrifying movement instantly caused Du Xiaofu to be jolted awake. Even with his cultivation, he felt it was difficult to breathe. Du Xiaofu stood up and shot his gaze towards the mountain range. Under his gaze, the boundless rays of light shot into the sky, and they formed numerous strange and shapeless markings and trajectories. These markings were extremely domineering, and they were densely condensed together. Just a glance at them caused Du Xiaofu to feel a slight piercing pain in his eyes. The markings of the Grand Tao. So many markings of the Grand Tao. Du Xiaofu was extremely shocked, and his heart beat several times faster. It was not that he had never seen markings of the Grand Tao before. Whether it was the Grand Beginning Demonic Dragon Clan's demonic dragon ancestor, Jiangxun, or his senior brother Lu Xiaoyu, whose cultivation was unknown, their every movement carried the charm of the Grand Tao. Naturally, there would be markings of the Grand Tao emitted from them. However, when these experts made their moves, they all had perfect control. They would not be like this, where the vast and mighty power of the Grand Tao filled the sky and rushed out without any restraint. This scene was too terrifying. It made people feel terrified, and their hearts beat rapidly. Is there really an unparalleled expert buried below? Du Xiaofu was puzzled. Facing the scene in front of him, he was bewildered. Those terrifying markings of the Grand Tao were definitely not something that could appear under normal circumstances. And if a terrifying great figure was really buried here in ancient times, and there was still energy left behind, then such a scene might occur. In addition, the markings of the Grand Tao were dancing in the sky. Obviously, no one had restrained them. This also proved the authenticity of this legend to some extent. The burial space mountain that has been silent for thousands of years is finally going to appear today. Around Du Xiaofu, many experts began to get excited. Some couldn't restrain their excitement, shouting loudly, "There's definitely something good. This time, we've struck gold." Some people also arrived. They couldn't help but rub their hands together, their faces full of excitement. However, while they were excited, no one was blinded by the great opportunity that might exist. They didn't rush into the mountain range directly. It should be known that many people who came here were experts. Naturally, they could see the terrifying markings of the Grand Tao like Du Xiaofu. Under such a ferocious scene, whoever rushed in rashly would be courting death. The markings of the Grand Tao that covered the entire sky were enough to kill an existence at the ninth sky of Immortal Realm in a flash. Even a meditative realm expert would have to retreat and not dare to step in here. Little Star, Little Yao, are you guys about to get out? Du Xiaofu's eyes sparkled as he gazed at the scene in the burial space mountain with anticipation. According to his senior, the two of them had encountered a great opportunity in this place. He didn't know what their cultivation bases would be after they got out. Time quickly flowed by. The sky was filled with endless multicolored light. It was magnificent and filled with thousands of streaks of auspicious light. However, behind such a gorgeous scene, there was a hidden danger. "Oh, someone's coming out." All of a sudden, an expert shouted. In fact, there was no need for him to remind them. Everyone's gazes turned in unison. Under everyone's gazes, two figures appeared in the thousands of rays of light. They were set off by the rays of light to appear as if gods had descended, overbearing and dignified. Little Yao, little star. Du Xiaofu was overjoyed. He couldn't help but take a step forward. How could he not recognize those two? Besides Little Star and Du Xiaoyao, who else could they be? At this moment, the two of them were emitting some special energy that covered their bodies. Thus, the markings of the Grand Tao in the sky couldn't hurt them. However, as time went by, the energy was draining fast. The two of them flew out of the burial space mountain quickly. "Dad, boss." When Du Xiaofu saw Du Xiaoyao and little Xingxing, the two of them quickly saw the purple-robed young man. After shouting in joy at the same time, they directly rushed to Du Xiaofu's side. "Little Star, little Yao." Du Xiaofu hurried forward, giving Du Xiaoyao a big hug. He was so excited. After the two of them let go, Du Xiaofu stretched out his hand again and rubbed little Xingxing's head. "Little Star, you've grown so tall." His eyes were fixed on Little Star. In front of him was a tall girl who looked to be about 17 or 18 years old. She emitted a youthful and charming aura. She had a delicate little face that was indescribably cute. The mark between her eyebrows had also become more beautiful than before. Du Xiaofu was full of praise. They hadn't seen each other for many years. At this moment, Little Star had become slender and elegant. She had changed a lot. Little Star has finally grown up. Du Xiaofu had an indescribable feeling in his heart. He only felt that he owed Little Star too much. If it wasn't for his lack of strength, she wouldn't have wandered outside for so many years. He couldn't even participate in her growth. It had to be said that this was a great regret. As her father, Du Xiaofu felt deeply ashamed. As these thoughts arose, Du Xiaofu's hand that was rubbing Little Star's head became gentler. "Dad, you've messed up my hair." However, Little Star was annoyed. She wrinkled her jade-like nose. She swung her hand and pushed away Du Xiaofu's devil hand. Her big eyes glared at him with malicious intent as she snorted discontentedly. "Haha!" Du Xiaofu smiled and retracted his hand. If it were in the past, he would have stared back and scolded this little girl. However, as they met again after a long time, he restrained his thoughts and started to observe the two of them. Not only did Little Star have a huge change, even little Demon Du's body was swept away. This woman's aura was as deep as the abyss and as vast as the sea. She had reached the first sky of a mortal realm, which shocked Du Xiaofu deeply. Such a frightening improvement was truly unimaginable. When they had left the divine martial world that year, Du Xiaoyao was only at the half-step to seizing God realm. It had only been a few years and she had reached such a realm. If the other people in the 33 heavens knew about this, wouldn't they go crazy? However, even though Du Xiaoyao's aura had undergone a great change, becoming extremely vast and boundless, and had risen in an extremely terrifying manner, his body still emitted an aura that could not be suppressed. This caused Du Xiaofu to be unable to restrain his laughter. Second sky of Immortal Realm? And the speed of Little Star's advancement made Du Xiaofu feel even more frightened, and he could not help but open his mouth in surprise. He observed carefully one more time. She was at the second sky of Immortal Realm. She was even more monstrous than Du Xiaoyao. However, what truly horrified Du Xiaofu was not just their cultivation, but the laws that the two of them grasped. At this moment, Du Xiaoyao had broken through to the Immortal Realm at the same time with the Space Principle and the Soul Principle, and Little Star was even more intimidating. She had broken through to the Immortal Realm at the same time with the Space Principle, the Matter Principle, and the Soul Principle. Du Xiaofu couldn't help but sigh. Didn't they say that cultivating many primitive principles at the same time was very difficult and rare in the entire 33 heavens? But why did two of them appear at the same time? Including himself, there were already 3 people who came from Shenwu world. If this news spread out, wouldn't it shake the entire 33 heavens? Haha, looking at Du Xiaofu's frightened eyes, Du Xiaoyao and Little Star exchanged looks. They couldn't help but laugh. "Boss, shouldn't you give your seat to me?" Du Xiaoyao's eyes cast a sidelong glance at Du Xiaofu, putting on an arrogant appearance as he said, "We agreed back then, whoever's strength is stronger, whoever will sit in the boss's seat. Now, I'm at the first sky of a mortal realm. It's my turn to be your boss." While talking, he slowly crossed his arms, looking very proud. Little Star stood next to the two of them. He didn't say anything, but the corners of his mouth curled up strangely as if he was watching a good show. "Okay, if you can defeat me, the position of the boss will be yours." Du Xiaofu's heroic spirit was boundless. He agreed readily. However, he changed the topic shortly. "But we won't compete today. We'll talk about it when we get back." He was also chuckling, harboring malicious intentions. In his heart, he was thinking about how to deal with little Demon Du after he returned. "You want the boss seat? Bah, no way. I'm at the ethereal path realm. I can even defeat a fifth sky of immortal realm expert. You're just at the first sky of a mortal realm, yet you want to compete with me? Dad, your realm." Looking at Du Xiaofu's face, Little Star asked with uncertainty. She couldn't see through him. Du Xiaoyao also shrank his neck. He knew Du Xiaofu too well. If he wasn't sure, he wouldn't agree that easily. However, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't see through Du Xiaofu's cultivation base. It made Du Xiaoyao more vigilant. "We'll talk about the old days when we get back." Du Xiaofu didn't want to talk more. "Boss, how did you know we're here?" Du Xiaoyao took a step forward, approaching Du Xiaofu and asking. His eyes sparkled with a dazzling gold light like two scorching suns. "The Lord of the 3,000 Great Worlds told me to meet you earlier. I came here to wait." Du Xiaofu looked at the man in gold clothes in front of him and said, "It's him." Du Xiaoyao and Little Star were surprised. Of course, they knew the Lord of the 3,000 Great Worlds. That year in Divine Martial World, he had arranged many things for them. Moreover, Little Star's father, Dragon God, was the good brother of the Lord of the 3,000 Great Worlds. "Dad, have you found Mother Shuang, Little Ba, Little Huang, and Little Lin?" Little Star suddenly blinked, looking a little worried. Not long after the 6 of them were separated from Du Xiaofu, they were hunted down again, and the other 4 were separated. After so many years, if he couldn't find any trace of them, Little Star felt that he couldn't face his dad. Hearing Little Star's words, Du Xiaoyao's eyes narrowed. He couldn't help but look seriously at Du Xiaofu, wanting to hear his answer. "Don't worry, I found them long ago. They're all fine now in a safe place." Du Xiaofu smiled, looked at the two and asked, "I'll explain these things to you in the future. The two of you obtained the opportunity in Burial Space Mountain. Do you know if there are other benefits?" Since they had come to this extraordinary place, they naturally had to understand the situation inside. If there were other opportunities, they definitely couldn't miss them. A powerhouse from the Phoenix clan is buried here. We obtained his inheritance, and almost all of his remaining energy has been exhausted. There's only a dead place left, and there are no more benefits to be found. Du Xiaoyao sighed softly. After obtaining the inheritance of the powerhouse from the Phoenix clan, he naturally knew how terrifying that powerhouse was. Therefore, he deeply felt sorry for his death. Not only that, there's also a great ominous being below. It's also extremely terrifying. It should have been suppressed by the powerhouse from the Phoenix clan back then. Little Star turned around, looked at the mountain range behind him, and said softly, "A great ominous being?" Du Xiaofu raised his eyebrows. Could this place really be related to the ancient demonic war? If the powerhouse from the Phoenix clan had fallen here, who exactly was he suppressing? "Father, you mustn't have any ideas about that ominous being." When Little Star saw Du Xiaofu's eyes light up, he hurriedly said, "When Uncle Little Demon and I entered, we felt an invisible force protecting us, and that was why we were able to obtain the inheritance safely. In the end, we even came out unscathed. However, if we entered directly, not to mention an ordinary immortal realm expert, I feel that even a slightly weaker meditative realm expert might not be able to withstand the great Tao veins inside. It's that terrifying?" Du Xiaofu's heart shook, and he immediately withdrew his little thoughts. He could imagine that when Little Star and Du Xiaoyao entered Burial Space Mountain, the invisible force that protected them was definitely set up by senior brother Lu Xiaoyu. It seemed that the powerhouse from the Phoenix clan wasn't simple, and the ominous being suppressed by him was terrifying as well. Otherwise, it wouldn't have made Little Star so afraid. However, even though he didn't have any ideas about Burial Space Mountain anymore, Du Xiaofu was still very curious. Exactly what kind of figures were buried there? How powerful were they back then? At the same time, were there even more secrets that hadn't been unearthed? It's more than terrifying. When we first entered, we couldn't even stand up. Our legs were really weak. The pressure there was so strong that it almost made our hearts stop beating. Du Xiaoyao also became serious and added, "Then let's not investigate it." Du Xiaofu nodded and dispelled the idea. Although the two ancient powerhouses were already dead, the place where they were buried was definitely not a place that just anyone could desecrate. Let's go. We'll leave this place first. If there's a chance in the future, we'll definitely come back to investigate this Burial Space Mountain. Du Xiaofu no longer hesitated and said to Du Xiaoyao and Little Star. Chapter 2866. Du Xiaofu planned to bring Du Xiaoyao and Little Xingxing back to transcendent Changrong Heaven. His plan was clear. He would first return to Yuqing Divine Kingdom and meet up with O Yangshuang, Du Xiaoba, Du Xiaolin, and Du Xiaohuang before returning to Shenwu World. Hundreds of years had passed. He did not know how Shenwu World was doing. The experts there were probably waiting anxiously to come to the 33 heavens. When he thought of this, Du Xiaofu could not help but smile strangely. His old friends from Shenwu World, especially those who had reached the Saint Realm or above, all wanted to come to the 33 heavens as soon as possible. He had not returned for hundreds of years. Some of the old guys were probably worried sick. Right now, some things had almost settled down, and there was nothing urgent. The Yuqing Divine Kingdom was peaceful, and the 20,000 young disciples in the Celestial Devil battlefield were taken care of by the experts of the various holy lands. There was no need to worry about anything happening. Therefore, it was time to go back and bring the experts to the 33 heavens. With Yuqing Divine Kingdom as a foothold, it could be said that Shenwu World had found a place to settle down. They would not be like the people from other small worlds. Most of them were homeless after entering the 33 heavens. I haven't seen Grandpa, Grandma, Auntie, and the others in a long time. I miss everyone, Little Xingxing said. After coming to the 33 heavens, they had experienced many things. They missed their hometowns very much. Let's go. We'll return to Transcendent Changrong Heaven and make some preparations. Then, we'll return to the desolate country, Du Xiaofu said. Then, he rose into the air, intending to leave. However, he had only just made his move and had yet to truly land when he saw many figures surrounding him. They were the people who had come to the Burial Space Mountain with the intention of finding a blessing. Du Xiaofu could not help but frown. This scene must be the trouble that Lu Xiaoyu had mentioned. Little girl and that kid, what did you find after coming out of Burial Space Mountain? Under their gazes, a burly man with a huge rhinoceros horn on his head walked over. He glanced at Du Xiaoyao and Little Xingxing before calling out, "Hurry up and tell me what treasure is inside. Did you guys get it?" Another expert stepped forward and said coldly. Although this person was in human form, there were many small arms on both sides of his body. He looked like a strange fish bone that was walking upright. The Burial Space Mountain is a forbidden area of the Yin-Xiong Wuzhou Heaven. How did you manage to escape unscathed? Immediately after, they saw another person with a face full of bumps and a grin that extended all the way to his ears walk up to the three of them. Tyrant Fire Rhinoceros, Flying Divine Ho, Heaven-Splitting Divine Toad. Du Xiaofu scanned through the three of them. Instantly, he knew where they were from. They were from the Tyrant Fire Rhinoceros clan, the Flying Divine Ho clan, and the Heaven-Splitting Divine Toad clan. He knew these three clans. They weren't weak. Although they weren't the top clans in the Yin-Xiong Wuzhou Heaven, they could be counted as middle-level clans. They weren't weaker than the 19 beast clans that had chased after Du Xiaofu's group in the Qian Su Jing Hua Heaven, or the 8-headed Serpent clan and the Chimera Lion clan. Moreover, the three of them were at the third sky of Immortal Realm. They also had several Immortal Realm experts with them. Besides the three beast clans, there were also some experts from the Human clan and other clans. They slowly gathered around and fixed their eyes on Du Xiaofu, Du Xiaoyao, and little Xing Xing. They wanted to hear their answers. Why should I tell you? Du Xiaoyao hated this kind of situation the most. She took a step forward, lifted her head, and said arrogantly, "If you want to know what's inside, go and see for yourself." This woman would never admit defeat. Even though she was facing so many experts, she wasn't scared at all. Du Xiaofu observed for a while. Many experts didn't move, especially those at the high level of a mortal realm. They just watched from a distance and didn't come forward to ask. However, he knew that it wasn't because they didn't want to come forward. It was because they didn't need to. With the early immortal realm experts leading the way, they just needed to watch. "Kid, are you talking to us?" The expert of the Tyrant Fire Rhinoceros clan was enraged. His bell-like eyes focused as he shouted at Du Xiaoyao. He could see Du Xiaoyao's cultivation base. She was only at the first sky of a mortal realm, which wasn't enough for him to put her in his eyes. "I'm talking to a bunch of dogs. Your barking is too loud. You're bothering me." Du Xiaoyao glared at him discontentedly. As soon as these words were spoken, the atmosphere in the area immediately changed. Many experts changed their visages. They couldn't help but release their terrifying auras, rolling toward Du Xiaofu, Du Xiaoyao, and Little Star. "Kid, you have a sharp tongue. I advise you to tell us the truth. Otherwise, you won't be able to avoid suffering." The expert of the Flying Divine Ho clan said with a gloomy face, "If you don't tell us, don't blame us for being impolite. If you don't want to die, don't dawdle. Otherwise, when we take action, it will be too late. If you're stubborn, we'll search your primordial spirit. We can get what we want." Many people were enraged. They were enraged because of Du Xiaoyao's words. Did this kid have a screw loose in his head? Couldn't he see the situation in front of him? There were only 3 of them, and they had hundreds of warriors surrounding them. Once they started to fight, they didn't need to tell the result. They could imagine it with their butts. It's annoying when a dog barks. When a group of dogs barks at the same time, it's even more annoying. Little Star gently stepped forward. Her slender body moved in the void. She didn't feel scared of the battle in front of her at all. Hearing her, the experts on the other side became more enraged. "Little girl, you don't want to do it the hard way. Tell us now, and we can leave your corpses intact." The third sky of a mortal realm expert of the sky-splitting Divine Toad clan shouted indignantly. Wisps of origin energy boiled around him, releasing a brutal aura. He was enraged. He directly said that he wanted to kill Du Xiaoyao, Little Star, and Du Xiaofu. "Really?" Little Star snorted, her eyes bright. "I can crush a chicken or a pottery dog like you with one hand." She didn't want to back off. She stood against the experts on the other side with equal harshness. "A second sky of a mortal realm warrior dares to talk big like that. You're courting death." The expert of the sky-splitting Divine Toad clan shouted. He couldn't stand it anymore. Of the 3 young men in front of him, other than the purple-robed young man whose strength he could not see through, the other 2 had lower cultivations than him and were far from being worthy of his attention. "I think you're the one who wants to die." Little Star arched her delicate brows and snorted. "If you want to die, I'll help you." As soon as he finished speaking, a dazzling divine light surged from his body. It was colorful and contained a strange and mighty power. It brazenly spread out in the void. It was as if a huge rock was thrown into a calm lake, and it exploded with an earth-shaking sound. Massive waves rose in the void and expanded like water ripples. "You don't know your place. Let me take care of you." The expert of the sky-splitting Divine Toad clan shouted. He didn't move forward but backed off instead. Subsequently, the huge mouth that was grinning from ear to ear suddenly opened wider and wider, and it grew larger and larger as if it wanted to swallow the entire world, causing others to be unable to help but feel shocked. Mwahaha. The innate ability of the sky-splitting Divine Toad clan is space law. When they open their giant mouths, they can swallow the sky, kill the earth, and swallow the stars and the moon. Although that little girl has second sky of immortal realm cultivation base at such a young age, she's going to die. In the distance, a cultivator spoke with a sinister smile in his eyes. When the others heard this, they also revealed gratified smiles. They had been waiting here for a long time. When they saw 2 people walk out of the burial space mountain, of course, They wanted to ask about the situation. Who would have thought that the other party didn't know life from death? They dared to provoke them when the difference in numbers was like heaven and earth. They were simply courting death. Wait until that little girl is captured. We'll know the situation deep inside the burial space mountain. There are many rumors about that forbidden land, but no one knows the details. I didn't expect that a kid and a little girl could get out of there alive. Perhaps they're safe there. Otherwise, how could two experts at first sky of immortal realm escape unharmed? It's good. With them here, we can know more about the situation. Perhaps we can find a way to get in there and explore. Check their primordial spirits. We can get a big fortune. Perhaps those two have already obtained some benefits. Let's take them as well. The experts of Yin Wu Sky discussed, their eyes gazing at little Xingxing and the expert of the sky-splitting divine toad clan. They wanted to see them fight. Everybody thought that the little girl couldn't withstand a single blow. She was only at second sky of immortal realm. How could she resist a third sky of immortal realm expert? Dealing with a third sky of immortal realm expert, perhaps little Xingxing can pinch him to death with one hand. On the other hand, Du Xiaofu's lips curled into a smile. He understood clearly how intimidating an immortal realm expert with 3 primitive laws could be, let alone a third sky of immortal realm expert. Even if little Xingxing faced a fourth sky of immortal realm expert, it would be hard to say who would win. Shi Yin was the best example. He had used the 4 primitive laws to reach the legendary ethereal Dao realm. At this moment, even if he faced a 5th sky of immortal realm expert, he could fight or even kill him. Moreover, little Xingxing had reached the 2nd step of the immortal realm. But today's situation is really troublesome. Du Xiaofu wasn't worried about little Xingxing. However, he couldn't help but frown. He looked around, thinking that it wouldn't be a good day. They were surrounded by so many experts. Although all the immortal realm experts of the Yin Wu Sky were here, at least 1/10 of them were here. There were tens of thousands of them. Shi Yin had to take Du Xiaoyao and little Xingxing with him. If they wanted to leave, it would be very difficult. At this moment, many people had made up their minds. They wanted to get information about the burial sky mountain from the 2 of them. However, whether they told the truth or not, they couldn't make Du Xiaofu and the other 2 leave easily. How dare you show off your petty tricks in front of me? While Du Xiaofu was pondering, little Xingxing snorted coldly. A delicate and pretty fist suddenly smashed out, and the terrifying origin energy of the laws shook, causing even space to tremble violently. In front of this fist, 3 phantoms of divine beasts stormed out. A gigantic azure dragon twisted its body, causing the void to explode inch by inch. The law of souls moved along with it, releasing a domineering pressure that suppressed the divine soul of everyone present. A vermilion bird flapped its wings, bringing with it raging flames. It soared into the sky and rushed to the 9 heavens. As it flapped its wings, the space was instantly frozen and tightly controlled. In addition, a black tortoise appeared. It was like a giant mountain occupying the void. It collapsed and pressed down on the immortal realm expert of the sky-splitting divine toad clan. This was the matter principle. It carried an extremely heavy and solid feeling. It was brazen in the world. Gua. The sky-splitting divine toad's throat made a gua sound. Its huge mouth enveloped heaven and earth, swallowing everything in all directions. After its terrifying space principle was activated, heaven and earth darkened, as if it had really disappeared from this place. However, the shaking space suddenly paused after little Xingxing's punch was thrown out. Rumble, Ayo. Then, there was a loud explosion, accompanied by a tragic and painful roar. Under everyone's gazes, the heavens and earth that had been swallowed by the heaven-splitting divine toad clan's expert instantly burst apart and exploded. A terrifying source of laws was surging out, causing the void to be annihilated. The heavens shook and the earth shook, collapsing one after another. Retreat. Hurry. Many experts were shocked, feeling incomparably shocked by such a scene. Many figures retreated quickly, leaving the center of this terrifying battlefield in just a blink of an eye. If they were a little bit slower, the warriors under third sky of immortal realm would have been hurt in just a blink of an eye. The power of 3 primitive principles isn't weak at all. Du Xiaofu's eyes sparkled. He was shaken by little Xingxing's competence. At the same time, he felt happy. At the same time as he muttered, Du Xiaofu also suddenly swung out, sweeping out a large area of brilliant light, completely blocking out the fluctuations of the battle between the two of them, causing it to be unable to cause any harm to him and Du Xiaoyao. Boss's competence. Seeing Du Xiaofu break through the remnant energy of the great battle so easily, Du Xiaoyao's eyes couldn't help but shrink fiercely. He had planned to pull Du Xiaofu and run away. He didn't expect that his boss could resist it that easily. Du Xiaoyao was scared out of his wits. He had just said that he wanted to take back his boss's position. It seemed like his idea was just a waste of time. He could resist little Xingxing's energy shockwaves easily. How strong was his boss? My boss's position. Du Xiaoyao beamed a forced smile, shaking his head and talking to himself. It seemed like he shouldn't think about the boss's position for the rest of his life. Du Xiaofu's growth speed wasn't something he could catch up with. While Du Xiaofu and Du Xiaoyao were lost in their thoughts, the two figures in the battle flew away, moving further away. The situation of the two fell into the eyes of many experts. At this moment, little Xingxing was still the same as before. Her skirt fluttered in the wind. She stood gracefully, which gave people an indescribable feeling. On the other side, the situation of the immortal realm expert of the sky-cracking divine toad clan had frightened Yin Xiong, Wu Jiutian, and the others. At this moment, his lips were torn apart. His chin was drooping, leaving only a small piece of flesh hanging in front of his stomach. Thick blood was oozing out from the wound. On the other hand, his body was in an extremely tattered state. Piece after piece of flesh had exploded apart to reveal ghastly bones, and his imposing aura had vanished completely. How could it be? How could it be? He's an expert at third sky of a mortal realm. How could he be defeated by a little girl at second sky of a mortal realm? Not only was he defeated, but it was a crushing defeat. If they had exchanged several more moves, I'm afraid he would have died. Everyone was dumbfounded. The result of the battle between the two of them caused their jaws to drop to the ground. No one had thought that the result would be like this. It was unbelievable. The gap between second sky of a mortal realm and third sky of a mortal realm was really obvious. Although some extraordinary warriors could ignore such a gap, they shouldn't be able to crush the other party like that. However, the fact was that the third sky of a mortal realm expert of the sky-cracking divine toad clan had suffered a big loss after just one exchange. He had almost lost half of his life. That little girl isn't ordinary. She has 3 primitive principles. She has broken through to the immortal realm at the same time. However, at this moment, an expert spoke up. Hearing him, the entire place burst into an uproar. 3 primitive principles. She has 3 primitive principles. It's impossible. How could someone control 3 primitive principles at the same time? Since the ancient times, I've never heard of such an expert. How could it be? How did that little girl do it? Controlling 3 primitive principles at the same time and breaking through to the immortal realm? How heaven-defying was her innate endowment to do that? Anyway, to the experts here, no one had ever heard of such an existence. However, they understood one fact clearly. Once such an existence grew up, she would have the competence to stir up the entire 33 heavens. The whole world would have to submit to her. Many experts from the Yin Xiong boundless celestial sect were boiling with anger. Everyone roared crazily, unable to accept such a thing. However, the fact was in front of them. They had to believe it. Chapter 2867. Heh, if you dare to fight with my niece, you should first weigh your own strength. Du Xiaoyao chuckled when he saw the horrified expressions of many experts. He naturally knew little Xingxing's strength. As the daughter of the dragon god, if she wasn't strong, then what justice was there to speak of? She's much stronger than I imagined. Du Xiaofu smacked his lips and said softly. He already had a premonition that little Xingxing was very strong, but he didn't expect her to be strong to this extent. Du Xiaofu could naturally see that little Xingxing hadn't used her full strength when she attacked earlier. She had held back. If she had used her full strength, then the expert of the sky-splitting Toad Clan might really have been killed in an instant. If that was the case, then it was really terrifying. Du Xiaofu even felt that if little Xingxing fought against an existence of the fourth heaven of the Undying Realm, she might have more than a 50% chance of winning. As expected of an expert who had mastered 3 complete primordial laws and had broken through to the immortal realm. In the distance, there were still many experts in the Yinxiong boundless heaven who hadn't made a move earlier. Among them, there were a large number of high-level immortal realm existences. At this time, everyone's eyes were shining as they looked at the scene. Their gazes fell on the slender girl with uncontrollable shock. They must have a great background. This little girl and those 2 young men must have a great background. That's right. Ordinary forces absolutely can't nurture such heaven-defying people. They might have poked a hornet's nest. Who knows how strong the forces behind them are? These experts were all shocked. It wasn't difficult for them to imagine that the purple-robed young man, the golden-robed young man, and the little girl's origins were probably not simple. This made everyone a little doubtful, and they didn't dare to act rashly. If they provoked an existence they couldn't afford to offend, then it would be a disaster for everyone. What are you afraid of? If everyone in the Yinxiong boundless heaven is united, what is there to be afraid of even if it's the 3 strongest clans? However, at this time, someone said so. His tone was eerie and gloomy. These words caused the surroundings to fall silent as many people fell into deep thought. These words were not without reason. As one of the 33 heavens, if the majority of the forces in the Yinxiong Wu Dao heaven formed an alliance, even the dragons, phoenixes, and Qilins would have to retreat, unless all 3 races came at the same time. Not long after, another human powerhouse nodded solemnly and said, "That makes sense. There must be some rare benefits in the burial space mountain. We must obtain them. But the precondition is that we Yinxiong Wu Sui must band together to avoid future troubles." I agree. At the very least, we must be united in this matter. That's right. No matter what, let's get the benefits from Burial Void Mountain first. The treasures in the ancient remnant land must not be lost. Furthermore, it is very likely that those 2 people have obtained them. For that benefit, we have to give it our all. I also agree. As long as we are of the same mind on this matter, we will not be afraid of any force. Shortly after, the forces of the Yinxiong Wu Sui heaven reached an agreement. They couldn't care too much at this moment. If they wanted to know the details of the burial space mountain, they had to ask the golden-clothed young man and the girl. No matter what kind of background they had, as long as their world united, even those ferocious ancient clans couldn't threaten them. With such an idea in mind, everyone's hearts were filled with confidence. One by one, the experts flew out and arrived where Du Xiaofu, Du Xiaoyao, and little Xingxing were, and once again surrounded them in the center. This time, the experts who took the lead were at 5th sky of Immortal Realm and 6th sky of Immortal Realm. You don't know life from death. Since you've come to our Yinxiong Wu Sui heaven, do you think we can make you rebel? A man with leopard spots walked out, shouting at the 3. He was at 5th sky of Immortal Realm, so he didn't put the 3 in his eyes. Among the 3 of them, only the little girl wasn't bad. Although she had 3 primitive principles, she couldn't overcome the big gap between their realms to defeat him. Apparently, the golden-clothed young man was only at 1st sky of Immortal Realm. He wasn't his equal opponent. The purple-clothed young man didn't need to be mentioned. Although his aura was profound, it wasn't hard to see it. He didn't have the aura of an Immortal Realm expert. He wasn't a threat at all. The man who had just spoken ignored him. Good. Yinxiong Wu Sui heaven. If you want to fight, the 3 of us will accompany you to the end. Little Star was never a person who would admit defeat. Facing so many experts, her aura surged crazily. As the daughter of the dragon god, she had a lot of confidence. When Little Star knew that her father had come here under the guidance of the master of the 3,000 great worlds, who was also her father's good brother, she wasn't afraid at all. Her father would always pay attention to her. He would never let her fall into a deadly situation. However, at the same time, Little Star wanted to measure her real competence to know her position. Little girl, you don't know life from death. If you want to die, how can I not help you? The man with leopard spots snorted. He took action immediately. His body moved like a lightning strike, disappearing from his spot in just a blink of an eye. Almost at the same time, he appeared beside little Xingxing, transformed into a huge leopard, and charged down brazenly. He's an expert from the Sky-Devouring Leopard Clan. The Sky-Devouring Leopard Clan is terrifyingly intimidating. Compared to the Sky-Cracking Divine Toad, the Tyrannical Flame Rhinoceros, and the Flying Divine Toad, they're much stronger. The innate ability of this clan is also Space Rule. However, when he uses his fifth Sky of Immortal Realm body, the power of the origin of the principle is much fiercer than the Sky-Cracking Divine Toad. People around couldn't help but discuss when they saw the man turn into a leopard shadow. As a member of the Incheon Wu Tian's clan, everybody knew how intimidating the Sky-Devouring Leopard clan was. They could definitely stand at the forefront of this world. Although they couldn't compare to the strongest clans, they were strong enough to look down on countless creatures. Under people's gazes, the Sky-Devouring Leopard's real body was revealed. Its two front claws slashed the void, tearing the world like a piece of cloth. Swish! In such a situation, Little Star didn't dare to be careless. Her exquisite body soared into the sky, facing the attack immediately. The three great primitive powers of space, matter, and soul were shaken at the same time. The intimidating power swept over and suppressed the sky and the earth. The azure dragon, the vermilion bird, and the black tortoise's three beast forms crushed the void and hovered in this world. They were like the lords of the immemorial time, incomparably fierce. However, when the Sky-Devouring Leopard's claws slashed down, a massive crack appeared. The three beast forms dimmed as if they were about to collapse. Arg! Little Xingxing let out a muffled groan from his throat as he retreated again. The pressure was so great that she couldn't resist it. The expert of the Sky-Devouring Leopard clan was too intimidating. When his fifth Sky of Immortal Realm cultivation base burst out, it wasn't something Little Star could endure. If the difference in cultivation base was too big, no matter how many tricks she had, she couldn't make up for it. Shortly after, Little Star's aura was pressed down. It fluctuated crazily as if it was about to vanish. Mwahaha! Little girl, I told you. You want to fight against me? You don't know your place. Hurry, tell me the situation in the Burial Space Mountain. Otherwise, I won't be polite anymore. I will suppress you and search your primordial spirit. The Sky-Devouring Leopard was so massive that his body was like a mountain ridge. His cold words came out of his mouth. His leopard eyes scanned the place, gazing at Little Star coldly as he grinned oddly at her. At the same time, Little Star's face became stern. The opponent was an expert. It was really tough for her to confront him directly. You're an old monster who has lived for so many years. Do you think you should be proud of yourself for having the upper hand in front of a little girl? All of a sudden, a voice arose. Along with this, a violet-robed figure appeared in front of little Xingxing. At the same time, a huge palm of light slapped down from the violet-robed figure, and it carried terrifying force as it collided with the eclipse leopard's claws. Buzz, buzz, buzz. As soon as the light palm struck, a large area of origin energy boiled. The power of the four great primitive laws was displayed. It contained tremendous power and hit the Sky-Devouring Leopard's claws in just a blink of an eye. Boom rumble. A loud explosion reverberated in the sky. Massive sound waves swept everywhere. Shortly after, the space that the Sky-Devouring Leopard had torn was shattered into nothingness, returning to the primal chaos. The Sky-Devouring Leopard's body was pushed backward. His leopard eyes were filled with surprise. Seeing the light palm vanish and the endless origin energy of the origin scattering, the expert of the Sky-Devouring Leopard clan relaxed a little. Kid, how dare you stop me? The Sky-Devouring Leopard's eyes moved, looking at Du Xiaofu who had just attacked. He shouted coldly, I know your innate talents aren't ordinary. I've cultivated for so many years to reach the fifth Sky of Immortal Realm. But so what? As long as I can subdue you, it's enough. He looked at Du Xiaofu with a ferocious look in his eyes. The purple-robed young man hadn't taken action yet, but the Sky-Devouring Leopard didn't expect him to be so strong that he could resist his attack. It wasn't something an ordinary person could do. The sky-devouring leopard was surprised that he had underestimated the young man. Apparently, the young man in front of him wasn't much weaker than him. However, even though he was surprised, he did not take this matter too seriously. No matter how extraordinary the three of them were, it was absolutely impossible for them to escape from the encirclement of countless living beings in the Incheong flawless heaven. If a genius dies prematurely, no matter how amazing he is, he'll only end up as a tragedy. I advise you to get out of the way. Otherwise, I'll kill you first. The sky-devouring leopard's eyes were cold as he gazed at Du Xiaofu. He didn't hide his murderous intention at all. Really? Du Xiaofu wasn't moved. He just asked softly. Then, he took a step forward and faced the giant beast directly. His body seemed as small as a mountain in front of it. However, Du Xiaofu's aura wasn't weaker than his opponent's. Dad, boss. Little Xingxing and Du Xiaoyao saw Du Xiaofu step forward, and they couldn't help but call out to him hurriedly. They already knew that Du Xiaofu's power had improved tremendously. He was much stronger than the two of them. However, the two of them didn't dare to think too much. Anyway, they had cultivated for about the same number of years. They had reached their current cultivation base after they had obtained the great fortune in the burial sky mountain. And Du Xiaofu must have had his own experiences during these years. However, it wasn't easy for him to resist a fifth sky of immortal realm expert. Thus, little Xingxing and Du Xiaoyao were worried. However, after the two of them spoke, Du Xiaofu gently waved his hand, indicating for them not to be nervous. Then, he looked at the giant sky-devouring leopard in front of him and said, I also advise you to get out of the way. Otherwise, if you force your way out, the one who will die won't be me. While Du Xiaofu was talking, his eyes shifted to the high-level immortal realm experts in the distance. He didn't put the sky-devouring leopard at fifth sky of immortal realm in his eyes. Du Xiaofu wasn't afraid of him since he had exposed his real power. Their real opponents were the experts who hadn't taken any action yet. They were the biggest threats to the three of them. What an arrogant kid. If you don't know your competence, I'll kill the chicken to warn the monkey. The fifth sky of immortal realm expert of the sky-devouring leopard clan bellowed. He was enraged. How could he endure being disdained by a young man? As he spoke, the leopard moved. Its four hooves stepped into the void, and ripples of the origin of laws spread out, as if it was walking on water. Those were the patterns of space principle. Shortly after, they confined this area and covered the purple-robed young man's body to prevent him from running away. Besides, the space around them was shaking as if it was frozen. Then, it pressed down like bricks. It was as if a series of city walls had appeared in the void, and all of them began to move with Du Xiaofu as the center. A mighty force burst forth, as if it was going to crush him into dust. Let's see who's the chicken and who's the monkey. Du Xiaofu snorted. His purple robe straightened like a javelin. Light of principles flowed from his body like a clear spring, for different auras diffused from him. As soon as this happened, many experts around felt like their throats were pinched. No one could utter a word. The four great original laws, such a sentence rose in everyone's heart. It wasn't hard for them to recognize that the auras emitted from Du Xiaofu's body contained all of the four great original laws. Such a scene caused countless people to be shocked to the extreme. Their hearts couldn't help but pound. They felt like they were about to suffocate. How could it be? How could he control the four great original laws at the same time? It's impossible. Standing opposite of Du Xiaofu, the expert of the sky-devouring leopard clan was dumbstruck. He couldn't help but mumble. His eyes were wide open as if he was in a trance. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Everyone knew that everything in this world could be attributed to the derivation of the four great original laws. However, when a creature cultivated to a certain realm, they had to break the cage and reconstruct their true self. They had to get rid of many useless laws and focus on one. Only then could they have a greater chance to surpass the immortal realm. In the entire 33 heavens, it wasn't that there weren't any creatures who had mastered two great original laws, but they were absolutely rare. Each one of them was enough to shock the world. Previously, The little girl had used the power of 3 great original laws to crush the third sky of Immortal Realm expert of the sky-splitting Divine Toad Clan. That had really shocked everyone. That was why they suspected that those people in front of them were from a very formidable force. However, at this moment, there were many people from Incheon Wuju Heaven present. Many forces were united in their desire to obtain the benefits of the burial space mountain. Naturally, there was not much fear in their hearts. After all, no matter how powerful one force was, it was absolutely impossible to fight against an entire macro world. But now, everything that the purple-robed young man revealed caused endless shock to arise in everyone's hearts once again. No one could believe that it was true. How could someone master all 4 great original laws at the same time? Where did they come from after all? Why were these juniors so intimidating? However, as soon as they were astonished, what happened next almost made their hearts stop. They were going to die from a heart attack. On the purple-robed young man's body, the origin energy of various laws madly circulated. The laws of time were profound and unfathomable. The laws of space were vast and encompassed all things. The laws of matter were complex and all-encompassing. And the laws of life were boundless and mysterious, capable of creating all living things. The 4 great original laws were shaking, intertwining with each other. They turned into a dazzling halo that spun rapidly around the purple-cloaked young man. A strange aura diffused from the light wheel, spreading out in the void. Even the experts who were far away felt their bodies soften because of this aura. The high-level Immortal Realm experts were caught off guard, and they all shivered hard. Dao aura. It's the Dao aura. How could it be the Dao aura? He has the Dao aura. It's too intimidating. What realm is he at? What's going on? Why does he have the Dao aura? Everybody was frightened. They felt their nerves tense to the extreme, as if they were about to break. The purple-cloaked young man's aura was just at the immortal realm. He hadn't reached the meditative realm yet. How could he have such intimidating Dao aura? It didn't make sense. It was totally unimaginable. Many experts were astounded at this moment. No one could understand how an immortal realm expert could have the Dao aura. Chapter 2868. Under the gazes of many experts of the Incheon Wu Heaven, Du Xiaofu slowly stepped forward. Boom, 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 boom. The space that the expert of the Eclipse Panther clan had frozen cracked inch by inch, scattering like gravel. The terrifying confinement collapsed in just a blink of an eye. The giant block moving horizontally in the void was suppressed fiercely. Its speed slowed down, and it became extremely difficult to move. Du Xiaofu had resisted the attack of the 5th sky of Immortal Realm Expert. It looked like he was lifting something heavy. The origin of the 4 great primitive laws and the Dao aura had wove together, intimidating the Eclipse Panther expert. You dare to be absent-minded in the middle of a battle. The corners of Du Xiaofu's mouth curled into a sneer. He looked at the Eclipse Panther, and the light wheel formed by the power of the 4 primordial laws instantly shot out and struck the Eclipse Panther. Tui. This wheel of light was like a divine weapon, slicing wantonly. In an instant, it sent the Eclipse Panther flying. Blood splattered in the air and dyed the sky red. The power of the origin of space was obliterated and turned into dust. However, Du Xiaofu's light wheel also exploded and dissipated into nothingness. What a dangerous kid. The Eclipse Panther retreated and hovered in the void far from him. He gritted his teeth, looking at the purple-robed young man with resentment. Ever since he had cultivated until now, he had rarely suffered such a big loss, especially when a junior had hurt him. It was something he couldn't accept. It was an absolute humiliation. However, he was at 5th sky of Immortal Realm. If Du Xiaofu hadn't controlled the 4 great primitive laws at the same time, he wouldn't have been able to sneak attack him. Therefore, at this moment, even though he was forced back by the attack and suffered a certain degree of injury, it was not particularly serious. However, in the eyes of the many experts outside, all of them were extremely shocked once again. That kid's competence is so intimidating. He could repel a desolate sky panther at 5th sky of Immortal Realm. I can't see through his cultivation. I don't know what level he is at. His aura isn't really intimidating, but he could beat a fifth sky of immortal realm expert. It's not truth-severing, and it doesn't seem like immortal either, because it's impossible to condense Taoist rhymes in the immortal realm. Countless experts were discussing with each other, their hearts filled with shock. Today, they had broadened their horizons. No one had seen such an expert before. Other than shock, everyone present had no other emotions. At the same time, little Xingxing and Du Xiaoyao were fiercely shocked as well. Both of them were shocked to the point their eyes and mouths were wide open. They had never doubted Du Xiaofu's talent, but the terrifying strength he displayed at this time still made the two of them unable to wrap their heads around it. Du Xiaofu's strength was too terrifying. Little Xingxing and Du Xiaoyao were mentally prepared, but they still found it hard to believe what was happening in front of them. This kind of cultivating speed was too frightening. They had been in the 33 heavens for just several hundred years, but Du Xiaofu could confront a fifth sky of immortal realm expert directly? Kid, you dare to hurt me. Today, I want you to die without a burial place. The expert of the Eclipse Panther clan became more enraged. The stronger Du Xiaofu was, the bigger the slap to his face. At the beginning, he didn't put the other in his eyes at all. He couldn't tolerate the fact that a young junior had actually injured him. Panther swallows 8 desolates, slaughter the sky, and destroy the earth. The moment these words came out of its mouth, the Eclipse Panther's huge mouth suddenly opened wide under everyone's gazes. A pitch-black passageway appeared in his mouth, leading straight to his abdomen. A terrifying black vortex was formed. Boom, boom, boom. Instantly, the sky around shattered. Mountains rose from the ground, and the rivers far from there were surging waves. All of them were sucked into the massive mouth that looked like a bottomless pit. The power of the principle was shaking. The origin was boiling, moving everything and destroying everything. This scene was too terrifying. Everything that was being pulled was swallowed into the massive mouth. It wasn't a simple swallow. Under the effect of the space principle, everything that the space principle carried was sucked into a bottomless abyss. Retreat. The warriors with weaker cultivation bases retreated immediately. They didn't want to be swallowed and become food in the Eclipse Panther's stomach. Not only them, even Du Xiaoyao and little Xingxing's expressions became somewhat serious. Apparently, the Eclipse Panther had used all of his power. No matter what, he wanted to kill Du Xiaofu. Dad, let's deal with him together. Little Xingxing's eyes glowed with a strange light. The Eclipse Panther's competence made her feel threatened. She was afraid that Du Xiaofu couldn't deal with it alone. No need. You guys step back. Let me deal with him. Du Xiaofu gently waved his hand again. Then, he stepped forward and stood still as if he had taken root in the void. No matter how the terrifying swallowing power pulled at the space principle around him, it couldn't move his body at all. Heavenly Palace of Purple Gold. With a light shout, Du Xiaofu's hand flashed and a broadsword appeared in his hand. He held it tightly. The Heavenly Palace of Purple Gold had been in the desolate space for a long time. Recently, it had finally finished swallowing the Nirvana Dragon Sword of the Tsaming Divine Kingdom and completed the fusion. The Nirvana Dragon Sword soul had also been refined and turned into its own power. At this time, its grade had reached the level of a high-grade true treasure of the laws. Even in the eyes of high-level immortal realm experts, it was absolutely a supreme treasure. Kid, die. The Eclipse Panther opened its mouth wide as if it could swallow the sky and the earth. At the same time, it released the fluctuations of its origin spirit and shouted at Du Xiaofu. He used all of his cultivation and wanted to take down the purple-robed young man in one fell swoop to avenge the humiliation of being severely injured. However, Du Xiaofu ignored him and only gathered the power in his body. The 4 primordial laws vibrated again and evolved crazily. The terrifying origin force first split and turned into an 8 trigrams diagram. With Du Xiaofu as the center, it rotated with a whirring sound. After that, the origin force that had split transformed again. The entire 8 trigrams diagram turned into a divine ring. Everything in it appeared as if it was a miniature version of the real world. All of the generated Taoist rhymes were restrained and no longer overflowed on the surface. It gave birth to thousands of forms and created everything. Origin void slaying sword, kill. Such a roar came out of Du Xiaofu's mouth. He raised the heavenly palace of purple gold above his head and slashed down fiercely. Qi, the divine ring evolved and all of its power was channeled into the heavenly palace of purple gold. A brilliant sword light pierced the sky and instantly appeared above the eclipse leopard's giant mouth. As the sword light descended, a terrifying crack appeared in the void. Everything that came into contact with it was instantly destroyed. The sword light was directed at the eclipse leopard's body. This was Du Xiaofu's most powerful technique. He used it directly against the enemy. Since today's trouble was unavoidable, he might as well use the most terrifying technique to intimidate the enemy. In addition, when Du Xiaofu used the origin void slaying sword previously, it was directly evolved. Now, with the heavenly palace of purple gold as the carrier, it was even more terrifying. It was as if it was crushing dry weeds and smashing rotten wood. If it met a god, it would kill a god. If it met a demon, it would kill a demon. Uft! Accompanied by a dull sound, fresh blood could be seen in the dazzling light. It was as dazzling as the red sun. Roar! The eclipse leopard's body was shaken violently. It was like a rolling mountain, shattering the void. At the same time, it roared miserably. Everyone around could clearly see that the huge leopard's body was dyed red by a large amount of blood, and there was a sword mark in the middle of its head. The skull had been cut open, and the stubble of the bone was exposed. The eclipse leopard was defeated. The experts of the Inxiong Wuzhou heavens were even more shocked. Everyone was shocked to the extreme. That purple-cloaked young man was too intimidating. He could push back an expert at fifth sky of a mortal realm and wound him severely. Among the younger generation, there should be no one who could do this. The cultivation of living beings was like the growth of trees. Every time a certain period of time passed, a corresponding trace would be left behind in the body. Therefore, at this moment, many people with profound cultivation could see through Du Xiaofu's true age with a single glance. That was why they couldn't use words to describe their feelings. Such a young junior. Really intimidating. Which force is it that can nurture such a terrifying figure? That kid is a human, and the golden-cloaked young man is a monster. He has the legendary red-bone horse monkey body. It's hard to tell the real body of that little girl. It's so strange. Too intimidating. I can't believe it. The force behind them is absolutely intimidating. This time, our Inxiong Wu heaven must unite. Otherwise, we'll have endless troubles in the future. Who can see that purple-cloaked young man's realm? I want to know why he's so intimidating. Many experts of the Inxiong Wu heaven were discussing. They couldn't suppress the fear in their hearts. They were guessing and trying to figure out the background of Du Xiaofu, Little Xingxing, and Du Xiaoyao. However, they couldn't make an accurate judgment based on the information they had shown. Everybody thought that if the force behind them burst out because of what happened today, it would be a terrible thing. At the same time, everybody was curious. They wanted to know Du Xiaofu's real cultivation base. That was what they couldn't figure out the most. That purple-cloaked young man didn't look like he was at the immortal realm, but why was he so intimidating? He could even defeat a fifth sky of immortal realm expert of the Eclipse Panther clan. I thought of a legendary realm. Right when people were filled with doubts, an expert at ninth sky of a mortal realm spoke up. You're right. His words immediately attracted everyone's attention. Everybody gazed at him. They wanted to know what kind of realm he was at. How could he be so intimidating? According to the records of my clan, the immortal realm and the meditative realm didn't exist in the Antiquity era. These two realms were gradually born after the heaven and earth were created. At that time, there was only one realm, which was called the ethereal path realm. At that time, some strong creatures could condense the Tao after reaching the ethereal path realm. In the end, those people became the strongest existences in the 33 heavens. This expert spoke, his eyes revealing a brilliant radiance, carrying a burning intent. Speaking about the legendary realm, he couldn't help but be more frightened. After hearing his explanation, the other experts were also shocked. Most of the forces didn't have such ancient records, so they didn't know this kind of secret. It could be said that they had broadened their knowledge. According to the legends, to reach the ethereal path realm, one must master the 4 great primitive laws and fuse them. The expert spoke again. He looked at the purple-cloaked young man in the distance, his eyes full of solemnity. No matter what, the word antiquity had been in the past for countless years. No one knew how long it had been. That legendary realm had long been annihilated in the annals of history, leaving only a few words in the records. The harsh cultivating environment and the abnormal requirement for natural endowments had determined that no one could enter the ethereal path realm after the antiquity era. But who would have thought that someone would actually be able to step foot into such a place today? How could this not be shocking? If this news spread to the other worlds in the 33 heavens, the whole world would be in an uproar. They would be shocked by such terrifying news. What should we do? Should we kill him or not? This kid definitely has an extraordinary background. He's in the ethereal path realm. If you say he doesn't have a strong background, I won't believe it even if you beat me to death. That's right. However, his cultivation is still shallow, and he hasn't had enough time to grow to the peak. We can't kill him. If we really kill him, it will definitely cause the force behind him to take revenge. What should we do? If we don't kill him, our enmity will be formed. When he grows up, it will be a huge problem. Not only that, but it will also be difficult for my Incheon Wujio Heaven to obtain the benefits in Burial Void Mountain. Many experts from Incheon Wujio Heaven began to hesitate. On one hand, they were afraid of the terrifying force behind Du Xiaofu. On the other hand, they coveted the treasures in Burial Void Mountain. If they didn't capture the 3 people before them, it would be difficult to find out what was in there and how they could enter and leave unscathed. Many high-level immortal experts were hesitant. They were considering whether to kill them or not. This was related to their fate in the future. This was a gamble. If they gambled correctly, many forces would soar and their strength would soar. If they gambled wrongly, they might face annihilation. I don't care so much. For the sake of benefits, I've decided to risk it all. No matter what, let's find the treasures in Burial Void Mountain first. Actually, there's no need to kill them. Just search their souls and spare their lives. That should be considered being courteous to the force behind them. Don't touch the violet-robed young man. You can definitely attack the other 2. Just search their souls and don't kill them. After a long struggle, many people's eyes had turned red. The treasures in Burial Void Mountain were something they wanted to obtain no matter what. After all, this was an ancient ruin, and it definitely contained a great secret. If they could successfully obtain it, who was to say that the major forces couldn't soar and even stand at the top of the 33 heavens? There was definitely such an opportunity. The ancient era was too brilliant. It was only because of the demon clan's massacre that it withered away. However, no one dared to doubt it. No one would think that the Burial Void Mountain, which had existed since ancient times, was an ordinary place. Since we've decided, let's do it. If we continue to hesitate, who knows what unforeseen events will happen. Don't touch the violet-robed kid. Start with the golden-robed young man. If we don't succeed, we'll deal with the little girl. Keep them alive and get the relevant information. Many high-level immortal experts of the Incheon Boundless Heavens had made up their minds. They had made up their minds to obtain the benefits in Burial Void Mountain. Many of them had red eyes, and they began to surround Du Xiaofu, Little Xingxing, and Du Xiaoyao. Finally, they can't bear it anymore and want to swarm over. Looking at everything happening around him, Du Xiaofu narrowed his eyes and muttered to himself. After repelling the devouring sky panther with one move, he did not chase after it. The surrounding experts were already closing in on him. It seemed like there was going to be a fierce battle soon. Thinking of this, Du Xiaofu couldn't help but look at the void. Today's matter was under senior brother Lu Xiaoyao's control. He probably wouldn't watch the 3 of them suffer too much. Thinking of this, Du Xiaofu's heart calmed down a lot. In order to obtain benefits, they're really crazy. Little Xingxing pouted slightly, and her brows were tightly knitted. With so many experts pressuring over, their momentum was extremely intimidating, causing her to feel heavy. It's only human nature, But these people are a little too crazy. There are indeed benefits left in Burial Void Mountain, but since we've obtained them, they naturally won't let it go. They want to find out what's inside. Du Xiaoyao pursed her lips and said. He understood the thoughts of Yin Xiong and Wu Ju Tian very well. However, their actions were a little too much. If it were him, he would definitely not casually attack people who had no enmity with him. Even if they wanted to obtain benefits, they would have to go there themselves. Let me give you a piece of advice. At this moment, Du Xiaofu suddenly stepped forward, facing the many experts from Yin Xiong and Wu Ju Tian, and coldly said, if you stop now, I can pretend that nothing happened. However, if you really want to fight, we'll definitely accompany you to the end. However, at that time, I'm afraid you won't even have the chance to regret. Du Xiaofu's eyes swept across the crowd, and his cold words caused the surrounding experts to stop in their tracks and hesitate once again. After all, this purple-robed young man had shocked them too much earlier. Everyone had to carefully weigh his words.